truth, facts. There is nothing in this resolution that should slow the effort, if it is legitimate, by Doge for a moment. Doge has confused billions and millions. It double counts its body count, and it expects us to accept on face value, as you and your Republican colleagues have, every word of propaganda that they spout. Today, we are concerned that Americans' right to privacy is under attack on multiple fronts. The only privacy in which this administration and you have shown the slightest interest is the privacy of Elon Musk and his Department of Government evisceration, Doge, or more accurately Dodge, since it dodges all forms of accountability. So thick has been the veil of secrecy surrounding Doge that Trump's attorneys actually represented in federal court that Elon Musk was not directing it. Elon's multiple tweets and President Trump's recent recognition of him during his congressional address make clear that it is indeed the unelected billionaire who's calling all the shots. Today's resolution of inquiry is unusual because these are unusual times and unusual events. This resolution represents a very modest effort to penetrate the secrecy and determine the extent of the administration's invasion of the privacy of just about every person in America. Musk has accessed and is attempting to access the personal and confidential information of our fellow citizens without our knowing the full extent of what data he's gotten to, what he's copied, how the data is or will be used by him, and the names, clearance levels, and the training of the individuals who access the data. That's the kind of facts that we seek today, not to slow any legitimate effort to reduce whatever waste, fraud, and abuse they can find, though we have yet to see a single case of fraud referred for prosecution anywhere, because fraud is a new term used by this administration to simply mean anything they don't like the reasonable administration of the Social Security and Internal Revenue System, like corrupt, which is applied to anyone who has the courage to stand up to this administration. What we have is an extreme breach of privacy. The resolution, which I am offering on behalf of every Democratic member of this committee, simply asks for documents relating to Doge's access to and usage of, first, the Treasury payment systems, second, the confidential taxpayer information protected by federal law, and third, the screenshots taken of Treasury payment systems data by a member of Doge. Tell me how any of that slows a legitimate investigation. No, it does allow a little accountability. It allows the public to know how much damage they've already incurred. This resolution, of course, would be unnecessary had this committee shown the slightest interest, the very slightest interest, in protecting privacy and demanding even a smidgen of accountability for Doge. 6 weeks ago, Speaker Johnson committed to a hearing before our committee on Doge, but he obviously had not received permission from his boss, Donald Trump, to do that. At the oversight hearing, neither Musk nor anyone from Doge or the administration showed up to answer a single question. And you're right, a witness testified she had no evidence of any wrongdoing here because she had no evidence of anything about this and was not associated with Doge or the administration. And of course, other than a few words of praise from Musk and Republican plans to declare his birthday a national holiday and carve his face onto Mount Rushmore, the majority has offered nothing but silence as Mr. Trump followed Mr. Musk's directive to fire more veterans than any president in American history and continue to seek highly sensitive private information. One would expect that Republicans who want a legitimate investigation of waste, fraud, and abuse would not leave that witness chair empty this morning. It is empty. It has remained empty, as has their commitment to any responsible oversight over this administration. This committee is supposed to be a guardian of sensitive taxpayer information. Instead, it has appeased Mr. Musk and given him access to anything he desires. I yield back.
Additional members wish to strike the last word. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a little mystified to hear you say that this is all about, quote, stuff that does nothing to serve the American people. I don't believe That's what this is about at all. This is about transparency. The stuff that you claim doesn't serve the American people, we're concerned about, like Social Security, veterans benefits, and Medicare. These all concern the American people. And the American people are fed up with this administration and Doge assessing our government's payment system and taxpayer data. It's understandable why they're worried. The Treasury and Doge has refused to answer our letters, our calls, and our requests for information. If you've done nothing wrong and you've got nothing to hide, then respond to our requests, and better yet, come before this committee. Don't leave the chair empty. Testify. My constituents, the American people, and all of us should be concerned with what Doge and its leader, Elon Musk, is doing with our data. Elon Musk receives billions of dollars in government contracts and now has access to the federal payment system and has seen sensitive taxpayer data. To date, he has not filed a financial disclosure, he's not disclosed conflicts of interest, nor given up control of his companies that are receiving billions of dollars in government contracts. We have no assurances that he's not using this information for his own personal gain. In fact, Mr. Musk has already used this administration for his own benefit. Doge has already targeted the Department of Labor, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, USAID, USDA, EPA, Federal Elections Commission, Department of Interior, Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Office of Government Ethics, all of whom have been investigating Musk or one of his businesses. And I'd like to ask unanimous consent to add to the record this report from the Judiciary Committee regarding these issues.
Without objection.
Thank you. Doge is not about going after waste, fraud, and abuse. If it were, they wouldn't have fired all of the inspectors general. That's where you start the investigation to find the waste, fraud, and abuse. Instead, they're using their time to pass a bill that critical programs like Medicaid and extends tax cuts to the top 1% of the American people. My Republican colleagues seem tired of hearing from the American people who are complaining about Elon Musk, President Trump, and Doge, because from refusing you see this because they're refusing to call the Secretary and Mr. Musk before this committee. You know this because their leadership are telling members to stop holding town hall meetings, refusing to meet with your constituents who are concerned about these issues. I've never seen such a thing in my entire time in this office. To my Republican colleagues, this problem will not just go away on its own. However, it can go away if you vote for this resolution and demand answers from this administration. The American people may have voted for change, but they did not vote for chaos. They did not vote to end Medicaid. They did not vote to fire more veterans than have ever been fired before in the history of this country. They did not vote to end or greatly reduce Social Security. I urge my colleagues to vote for this resolution, and let's get disclosure, let's get transparency, and let's get witnesses in this committee to tell us what they're doing and answer our questions on behalf of our constituents and the American people. I yield back.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is indeed a sad morning. Very sad morning, when this committee, the oldest and most continuous in the Congress, neglects its responsibility and essentially holds this hearing today to block any further discussion. The men and women on this committee are good people. They're honest and caring people. And that's why I do not understand why you would relegate this committee to no longer being of significance and resort to saying, you will do whatever Elon Musk and Donald Trump tell you to do. Where's the independence of the committee? Where's the legislature? We're an equal branch of government. And you start off with a blather, and yet when we look at the empty seats here, where's Elon Musk? I'm sure he's a genius and is a very credible person because of the wealth he's accumulated. But that does not put him above the law or the responsibility to come before this committee in this Congress. If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he's found are so eminent, why isn't he here explaining it? You know why. Because he's out to privatize Social Security. He's been on television the last couple of days talking exactly about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and what he intends to do. Privatize it. The American people, some of them may have been born at night, but not last night. People are aware of this. Every single one of your districts, all the money that comes in monthly, and you have not done, you as a Congress, have not done anything in more than 54 years. And now you have someone coming in to privatize a system, something you have longed to do going back to 1982, because Elon Musk thinks that this is the best thing to do. President Trump has called Social Security a scam. Elon Musk, as Mr. Neal said, called it a Ponzi scheme. Ask that of the people in your district. Ask that, Mr. Smith, of the more than 198,000 people in your district who rely on Social Security, and you won't even let the person who's planning to privatize it, who's telling the big lie in front of everyone, in bold as he possibly can, saying, this is what we're going to do. The Congress is in our back pocket. We don't even have to come before them and testify because we control the House, we control the Senate, and we control the presidency. And it's the tyranny of the executive. It's why these resolutions were first adopted back in 1789, because the Founding Fathers knew that the executive branch does not have total authority over the legislature unless you have a willing party that says, no, we're going to do exactly what you tell us to do, Mr. Musk and Mr. President. It doesn't matter to our constituents. It doesn't matter how much money they are not going to receive. We're not even going to tell them the truth about what's going to happen to them. And every single one of these districts where they're being shut down and their personnel, and as Mr. Neal said, then after you cut and eliminate the people, say the agency isn't responding accordingly. No other agency operates for under less than 1%. With that, they administer to over 70 million people in the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly and children. Shame! Shame! Can't bring people in front of this body? If he's right, if they're so good, if they're so just, why aren't they here telling the American people about it? They're not, because you know the truth. It's about privatization. I yield back.
No time to yield. Mr. Arrington?
I can hardly sit here. I was hoping to just let my Democrat colleagues sound off this morning, get through their one-act plays, but I can't. I can't sit here and listen to this grandstanding. They wear their armor of indignation proudly, but we know what's underneath that. And I hate to question the motives of my colleagues, but this is we have touched a nerve, Mr. Chairman, and we have entered the inner sanctum of the Democrats' temple. And I think that holy grail is the government and their unionized government employees. And if you get anywhere near it, this is the reaction you're going to get. My friend said they didn't vote for these things. They didn't vote for this deep cleaning in the bureaucracy. They didn't vote for the kind of rooting out of waste and fraud, but they say that with a false narrative and with fear-mongering for Medicaid beneficiaries, and they try to scare, no, sir, I got to finish this. They're trying to scare our seniors and scare the most vulnerable. That's a long-standing tactic. But the American people didn't vote for transgender operas in Colombia. But where's the indignation on that? I haven't heard a single person talk about that. What about the transgender comic books and the DEI musicals in Ireland and all this absurd and insulting example after example of just complete and utter wasting the taxpayer dollar? The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, that's a government entity, so you ought to bow down to that authority as well and accept it hook, line, and sinker for their data and statement on fraud, which is up to $5 trillion over the 10-year window. $5 trillion. Where is the outrage on all of that? I've never heard it, not one time. This is, I hear about the unelected billionaires because you all love class warfare. You love to divide people by race and gender and class. That is the MO. I mean, God, I love you guys as people, but your party is broken and bankrupt, and that's why the taxpayers put this president in office and gave us unilateral, unified Republican leadership because they want us to make sure that their tax dollars are protected and that they're being spent wisely and that we act as fiduciaries and that the people who were intended to get benefits from these programs are getting them, but not illegal immigrants and not people that are not qualified. I see the list you're holding up. Enough with the theater. Where is the outrage? Are you not insulted by this list? You want me to read this list? You want me to go through the same list of indigenous people, inclusive justice, primary literacy, female empowerment, personalized 3D avatar tools for gender identities? This is stupid. This is stupid. Mr. Chairman, reclaiming my time.
You got your time.
Where was the concern for conflicts of interest and abuse of power when the IRS leadership and the special prosecutors from the Biden DOJ were obstructing the investigation into the Hunter Biden scheme? And your president said, I don't know anything about it, never been involved. And we knew that wasn't true, and we discovered it wasn't. But where was the drive and the passion that I see from you all, my colleagues, on that issue and the transparency or lack thereof for the last 2 or 3 years? I never see this until we're talking about the tip-to-tail audit of the federal government to root out wasteful spending and act as fiduciaries on behalf of the taxpayers. It's unbelievable to me. It's unbelievable, but I think it's on such display today that the American people in their good judgment are reading right through it just like I am. And again, if you want to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, you're making a good case to do that to the American people. They're on our side on this issue. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Davis.
I move to strike the last word, Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record this Democratic letter to Secretaries Bennett, Bassett, and Kennedy on the National new hires. And I yield 30 seconds to Representative Larson.
Without objection, so ordered.
Just say to my friend over there, I never heard him mention once Social Security. That's what we're talking about. I never heard you mention at all the 135,000 people in your district that rely on this. Have you told them about Elon Musk's plan? Have you told them about all the fraud and abuse that they're receiving? Is it fraud and abuse in your district for the 95,000 retirees, for the 14,000 disabled workers, for the 10,000 parents, for the 4,800 spouses, or the 9,000 children? That's what we're talking about. Social Security and the lack of your willingness to bring before us the person who has said they are going to privatize it and therefore cut and hurt these benefits of these individuals. Tell the truth. If you're for privatization, put your plan out there and vote on it.
Reclaiming my time. Mr. Chairman, President Trump allowed the biggest federal data breach in history when he allowed Elon Musk and his hackers to steal Americans' extremely private financial and health information from the Treasury Department. We don't know if Mr. Musk will illegally stop one's Social Security, tax, or Medicare payments. We don't know if he'll sell our information to the highest bidder or delay government contract payments or grants to his competitors or people he dislikes. We don't know if the Musk hackers with histories of racism who took screenshots of private information and shared it with the Proud Boys. When Treasury erected some barriers, the Doge hackers waltzed into H.Res to get the tax data from the child support data sets. This committee has an obligation of oversight, yet my Republican colleagues objectively refuse to exercise their constitutional obligation to ensure the executive branch follows the law. The Republican failure to protect our democracy, congressional authority, and American privacy is beyond alarming. This Republican oversight failure is coupled with the intense efforts to undermine tax enforcement for the wealthy. When the House passed CRR, the Republicans will champion a $41.8 billion rescission of funds to modernize the Internal Revenue Service and make sure wealthy tax cheats don't pay what they owe. The Trump administration is doing irreparable harm to our country and citizens by accessing the Treasury payment systems, and Democrats today are demanding that the Republicans step up and do their jobs, demand the answers from the administration owed to the American people. After the CR, $41.8 billion would have been rescinded. Public Law 11805, $1.4 billion. FY24 Omni, $20.2 billion. FY25 CR, $20.2 billion. A sum total of $41.8 billion taken from the American people in a real kind of way. Mr. Chairman, this is unfair, unethical, and unconstitutional. I yield back.
Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to commend Representative Doggett for leading this resolution of inquiry regarding Doge's access to the Treasury payment systems and confidential taxpayer information. The President has allowed Elon Musk to run rampant in federal agencies without any congressional oversight. Particularly egregious, and why we're all here today, is his access to all Treasury Department payments, including payments of Social Security and Medicare benefits. Congress can't sit idly by as our democratic institutions are dismantled by a billionaire from within. It's our duty to find out exactly what private and sensitive information is in the hands of Elon Musk and his Doge bros. I'm calling on my Republican colleagues to join us in this inquiry. Stand up for your constituents. Don't hide and refuse to hold town halls and to be accountable to the people who elected you to serve them. It's critical to ensure the integrity of Treasury's payment system and, more importantly, the privacy of Social Security, Medicare, and taxpayer information. President Trump's surrendering control of the government to Elon Musk is a direct attack on our democracy. It is Congress's responsibility. It is a congressional responsibility to exert its oversight authority to prevent this constitutional overreach. The presidency is the most powerful position in the world, but a president without congressional oversight is just a king. And we don't have kings in a democracy. This shouldn't be a partisan fight. It's a fight for our democracy. It's a fight for our free and democratic institutions. Democrats are outraged, but we need our Republican colleagues to join us and stand up for the rule of law. You guys talk a great game when it comes to rule of law, but when it comes to exerting Congress's power as a co-equal branch of government, you guys are hiding in the shadows. Stand up for the people who elected you to come here and represent their interests. But if you won't even face them in a town hall and listen to them, should we be surprised that you don't want to exert that power to hold this administration accountable? I yield back the balance of my time.
Ms. Del Bene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. My constituents are confused and afraid, and rightly so. They want answers to very basic questions. They want to know why Donald Trump has given Elon Musk and his Doge team access to extremely sensitive, private, personal data that's supposed to be protected by the Treasury Department and the Social Security Administration. They want to know what Musk's unvetted and unqualified acolytes are doing with their Social Security numbers, their home addresses, their income levels, and confidential medical records that they were required to submit when applying for disability. They want to know how a president could support these unlawful breaches into the databases of taxpayers and Social Security recipients, which puts their livelihoods at risk. And as bad as that is, there's so much we don't know. That's why we're asking Republicans to join us and vote for these resolutions of inquiry. This is pretty simple. They ask very simple questions like, what confidential taxpayer information has Elon Musk and Doge accessed? Why is this controversial? We are a co-equal branch of government. We are in charge of oversight. If you feel like there's no concerns here, then why wouldn't you want that information to be out in the public for people to be able to ask questions and get a response? This should be easy if you're not concerned. Instead, Republicans are hiding, and that's why we're sitting here at this moment. You know, before Congress, I was the director of the Washington State Department of Revenue, and so I know firsthand how important it is to protect sensitive information from bad actors in order to maintain public trust in government. And now the public wants to know if our government is the bad actor, illegally sharing personally sensitive data that could result in your identity being stolen or your medical records being leaked. You know, I have been pushing for nearly a decade to pass a national data privacy law to put people back in charge of their data and protect personal information. What is more personal than your Social Security number or your medical history or your financial history? So, and especially when we look at medical history, we've seen Republicans going after women seeking reproductive care. People are worried about health care being cut, targeting those with pre-existing conditions or whoever else they want to target next. Of course, people are concerned about how information will be used. We should be trying to strengthen privacy laws, not undermine existing laws by letting random Doge staffers breach existing law by accessing private taxpayer data. This should be a bipartisan effort to get answers to questions, and it's incredibly disappointing to see Republicans trying to avoid even the most basic questions from being asked. And as Congresswoman Sanchez suggested too, maybe not surprising if folks aren't even willing to have a town hall and listen to their constituents. So it's important that we ask these questions, and it's important that we get answers. And I yield back.
Mr. Smucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's fascinating this morning to hear the feigned outrage of the Democrats today. It's as if they haven't heard the message of this previous election, like it never occurred. I can tell you, in my district, what the American people wanted was to prioritize America, prioritize the American people over the bureaucracy, over the massive federal government. Do you know today that government spending is over 1/3 of GDP? This is what the Democrats are defending. Over 3 million employees in the federal government alone, not including state and local. And the fallacies that have been brought up here today, Social Security being privatized, no one has mentioned that. In fact, the president has said he wants to protect Social Security. Look at his record in his first 4 years. No, that I will not yield. Look at his record in the first 4 years. He did nothing to change Social Security in any way. And he said multiple times he's going to protect Social Security, going to protect Medicare. And I can tell you, every Republican on this side of the aisle believes and agrees that we should protect the vulnerable among us. We should protect those programs for individuals who truly need them, who have been paying into the system. So it's bizarre. It's outrageous, the kind of things that they've been saying. Now, let's talk a little bit about Musk. And Mr. Larson in particular knows that Social Security will be bankrupt in 9 years or 10 years. At that point, no, I'm not going to yield. You had your time. You had your time. Will be in 9 or 10 years, projections show that what is owed in Social Security will be more than we're taking in. So you ought to be extremely happy if we're finding waste in the system, because every dollar of waste in Social Security, in Medicare, in every other program, every dollar of waste and fraud is a dollar that is available to the people, to the recipients who deserve that service. So, you know, many presidents have tried this. We've seen under the Clinton years, they trimmed back the federal workforce. Nixon talked about it. But this is finally a president who's willing to take on the bureaucracy and really make a difference. 3 million employees. You don't think that we can find some ways to trim? And you know, we've heard reports here, there's waste all over the place, there's fraud. And what Mr. Musk is finding could impact our deficit in a big way. The American people know that we're bankrupt. The American people know we're bankrupt. Just think of this. This year, we're spending $7 trillion and we're taking in $5 trillion. You're all you're arguing to keep that. If we don't change our course, we're going to see a sovereign debt crisis, and every American is going to be impacted.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I'm not going to yield.
You voted to
you have
yesterday.
You'll have your time. I'm not yielding. We will have a sovereign debt crisis if we don't change course. And where we should start is exactly what the president is doing. Root out every bit of waste and fraud that we can find. That's where we should start. It might make an amazing difference. This is why, by the way, I think you're on the wrong side of this. I think the American people are going to see the kind of waste and fraud. They support this. Why do you think today the majority of the American people support what Elon Musk is doing? Why do you think today the majority of the American people support what the president is doing? And one other thing. You keep talking about him. He should be right here. You can follow what he's doing. He's doing interviews. He's got Doge.gov. He's uncovering what he's doing. This is not someone who is doing this in the dark. He's being very open about what is happening. So again, I think you're on the wrong side of this. The American people side with us today. They sided with us in this previous election, and you keep this up, they're going to be siding with us with many elections to come. I yield back.
Thank you. I will make sure that whenever we give 5 minutes to each member, it's honored without disruption. When a member says they do not yield, do not continue to go after the member and try to take away their time. Ms. Chu.
I move to strike the last word. In the absence of any strength from Republicans and delusional statements about access to Musk, and with Representative Doggett's leadership, Ways and Means Democrats are stepping in to do what the majority on this committee has refused to do: fulfill our constitutional responsibility to conduct actual oversight and finally get answers from the Trump administration about what exactly Elon Musk and Doge accessed, altered, downloaded, or used when they were improperly given access to Treasury's payment systems and taxpayers' protected confidential information. Now, Representative Moore and I tried to get answers directly from the Speaker and the Treasury Secretary. We then urged the Speaker and the Chairman to hold a proper hearing in this committee to get answers from Musk and Treasury officials. And Ways and Means Democrats have sent letters and introduced amendments to demand answers from the administration. But so far, Republicans have refused to act. This resolution of inquiry is only necessary because in the face of extremely troubling facts, Republicans have pretended not only that there's nothing wrong, but that Congress has no right to even understand what Musk and Doge are doing. It is astounding to think that Republicans have been so unquestionably submissive and obedient to Trump and Musk that they cannot even bring themselves to even ask questions about their actions and whether it invades taxpayer confidentiality, let alone question the firing of many thousands of federal employees, including 80,000 from the Veterans Administration, and the firings of inspector generals who are to have oversight over all our federal departments. I remind my colleagues that it was just last year that Democrats joined you in passing legislation to increase penalties for violating taxpayer confidentiality. It is the height of hypocrisy not to support this resolution of inquiry. But Dems will not be submissive and obedient. Democrats are demanding answers on behalf of all our constituents who are also demanding to know what Elon Musk has done with our confidential information. I urge support for both resolutions of inquiry under consideration today, and I would yield the balance of my time to Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Congresswoman Chu. I just want to point out that, the righteous indignation that we heard from some of my colleagues on the Republican side of the dais just amazes me. This idea that nothing was done in the dark in all of this. For crying out loud, you all heard the guy say that people 300 years old are collecting Social Security. That statement is made by someone who's absolutely full of prunes. The one gentleman who was referring to all this waste, fraud, and abuse is the chair of the Budget Committee. If there's all this waste, fraud, and abuse, why haven't you guys ferreted that out and brought it forward? You've been in charge for the last 3 years. The time, I'm up pretty high on this dais, so I've been around a while. 74% of the time that I've been in Congress, I've been in the minority. So are you saying that because there's all this waste, fraud, and abuse, you guys have been asleep at the switch? And I'll guarantee you, none of my constituents and none of your constituents voted the way they voted to end Medicare, Medicaid, to privatize Social Security, to fire thousands of veterans from the good jobs and the good work that they're doing. That is just absurd to think that that's the case. If there is wage, fraud, and abuse, we should be working together to find it. The inspectors generals most certainly should not have been fired. They're the ones on the point of the spear who were charged with doing that. This empty witness seat in front of us speaks volumes towards the insincerity that we're seeing today. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back and now recognize Ms. Moore for 5 minutes. To strike the last word.
I move to strike the last word, Mr. Chairman.
You recognize.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank my colleagues. And so I don't want to feign any outrage here. I just want to keep the main thing the main thing. What we're talking about here is a resolution of Mr. Doggett's that I co-sponsored is a resolution of inquiry regarding the accessing of our private taxpayer data by an unelected, someone who is actually ineligible to run for president, multi-billionaire who's had no Senate confirmation, no oath of office, no ethics training or anything that he's taken, and he has violated Section 6103. Now, I've been on this committee long enough to really see the outrage that we have had on this committee about violations of Section 6103. And I just want to remind you, Mr. Chairman, that we were so outraged that we increased the penalties. You know, don't forget, we increased penalties on violations of Section 6103. And so we simply are making an inquiry as to what this man is doing with our data, why he's accessing it, and that's really a fair question. And what do we find ourselves facing when we do this? All these non sequiturs, you know, trans people and what money is spent on condoms and, I mean, undocumented immigrants, that's what we do for a living. We voted, you know, we've got very qualified, capable people on the Appropriations Committee on your side, you know, who can go through, you know, budget, you know, account by account and eliminate what you call waste, fraud, and abuse. It's a non sequitur because that has nothing to do whether that's true or not. If someone is getting a Social Security check and they're 300 years old, that's a terrible thing. But it doesn't have anything to do with an ineligible person accessing our data. And so I just want to make sure that we stay on the subject. We're not talking about trans people today or the 0.002% of people in America who apparently are trans people. We're not talking about undocumented immigrants. And we certainly are not talking about anointing an unelected, naturalized citizen, not born here in America, citizen, who's a billionaire, to be able to march in with federal marshals, even at the direction, and to literally threaten people out of their seats to access our information. So now, if this is not a crime that has been committed, which is what I think it is, then we should have Mr. Musk sitting there explaining to us how going through our Social Security information, our taxpayer information, is going to rid us of the problem of trans people. How it's going to solve, how it's going to reconcile, you know, the majority party's concerned about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, what's the plan for excluding people through going through our personal information? It's a non sequitur. And I would yield the last 55 seconds to my good friend, Mr. Larson.
Mr. Larson is recognized.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. And let me say, having both chaired the Social Security Subcommittee and now being the ranking member, I get upset because of what's happening to the American people. These are good and decent people on both sides of the aisle. But fundamentally, you're telling me that there is no obligation to have the man who's been placed in charge of finding $2 trillion in cuts, who has said publicly on more than one occasion that yes, 70% of the budget is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense, and that's what we're going after. Only one of those areas has a trust fund of $2,700,000,000.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Kelly to strike the last word.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to yield my time to Mr. Smucker.
Mr. Smucker is recognized.
Just like to make a point in regards to access to taxpayer information. I would assume that every employee of the IRS has access to taxpayer information. I would assume, particularly those who are auditing accounts, are going to have access to some taxpayer information. And I just want to remind folks listening that the Democrats just last year were advocating to hire tens of thousands more, maybe as many as 80,000 additional auditors, or at least people in the IRS, all of who have had access to taxpayer information. We're talking maybe 100 people here who have potential access to taxpayer information.
Will the gentleman yield?
No. And I want to remind one other thing. There was a leak of taxpayer information, a massive leak. And we're learning that may have been 450,000 taxpayers' information or more. And I didn't hear a lot of outrage from Democrats because it matched their political narrative that, you know, it was the taxpayer information of some of the highest income earners. And I heard a lot of Democrats celebrating, maybe not here, but a lot of Democrats across the country celebrated that an independent contractor who did have access to taxpayer information released that information to the American public. Where was the outrage we're hearing today then? Where was the outrage then? I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Boyle is recognized to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I would encourage everyone, not just the members of this committee, but everyone who is watching and listening to read this resolution. It'll only take you a couple minutes. It's just 2 pages. This is about as straightforward a resolution as it gets. I honestly don't understand why anyone would vote against this. It is providing all of us necessary information about what exactly has been accessed. That's important information if you care about privacy, if you care about security, and frankly, I would think that if those who are involved with Mr. Musk's effort are proud of the work they're doing, I would think they would want this information to be out. Why wouldn't we want to give taxpayers and all the American people transparency? Why wouldn't we want a full airing of exactly what has been accessed? The logs, the documents, our private information. I'll save any comments about Social Security until later when we're on that resolution, but specifically in Treasury, they have access to our Social Security numbers, date of birth, home address, our full employment history, salary. If some 21-year-old frat bro working for Elon Musk has access to that, I would rather like to know it. I think the folks who I represent, 765,000 of them in the city of Philadelphia, absolutely want to know who is seeing their most private data and most private information. I think that transcends whether one is a Democrat, Republican, independent, voter, or non-voter. I think, frankly, it is just common sense. And at the very least, this is something that all of us as fellow Americans should be able to vote and provide that level of transparency to the American people. And those who don't want to provide that level of transparency, it raises questions. Why don't they want that transparency? Now, I have a few further things I could say, but I want to yield to my good friend and colleague, Mr. Doggett of Texas, the 2.5 minutes remaining.
Well, thank you very much. We've heard a lot of huffing and puffing. We've heard distraction to foreign aid and many other issues, but not one of the Republicans who have challenged this resolution have given us any reason, any explanation as to why Musk needs every American's taxpayer data, their banking, their Social Security records, and who knows what else. These federal databases that the Musketeers have sought access to even contain sensitive information on child custodial arrangements that are used in administering the child tax credit. And so while tax season is underway, American taxpayers particularly deserve some answers. And I've been getting calls from people in Austin expressing concern and suggesting that they want to delay the filing of their tax return this year because they're not sure that they want an unelected billionaire going through it and invading their privacy on some illegitimate fishing expedition. A number of these constituents have questioned whether they can be sure that their information is safe. Some are holding off on filing, and in fact, they're not alone, because so far this tax filing season, about 2 million fewer Americans have filed their taxes compared to the same period last year. The young genius hackers that Musk hired as Musketeers had their own website hacked last month, raising questions about their ability to protect this data. I'm particularly pleased that Mr. Smucker mentioned Mr. Nixon. You know, we have had a previous criminal in the White House, and his name was Richard Nixon. And because of his lawlessness, this Congress reacted, finally, belatedly, to the Watergate events. And one of the things that Congress did, because a lawless Nixon administration attempted to weaponize the IRS against its opponents, was to pass a new law. And it's that new law that's being disregarded. It required that taxpayer data be treated as strictly confidential, not subject to inspection or disclosure, except in the very most limited circumstances. A penalty of 5 years in federal prison could apply. And the Congress also passed the Privacy Act of 1974, both in reaction to a lawless president. Now we have lawless invasion of those records again. And it's incumbent on this committee to fulfill its responsibilities rather than to yield all of its power to Musk and Trump.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Mr. Byer to strike the last word.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
The resolution of inquiry is simple. Support it, and you honor the transparency Elon Musk promised us. Oppose it, and you believe that the activity Elon Musk is conducting should remain hidden from the American public. The activity where he and his team of special government employees gain access to sensitive databases. This is one of the concerns I'm hearing in an uproar from my constituents, including conservatives and Republicans. There's absolutely no reason Doge should be trying to access Treasury payment systems and confidential taxpayer information without permission, without approval from the American public and Congress. And I'm deeply concerned that this conduct is breaking many laws that Congress has put in place. I led an investigation earlier this week with my colleagues Jamie Raskin and Maxwell Frost to the Office of Government Ethics, inquiring about the potential criminal exposure of the volunteers and the employees of Doge, to ensure that those individuals know that their ethical and legal responsibilities under the law, particularly conflicts of interest. We know that the statute of limitations is up to 5 years, so that's past the length of this administration. And violations can lead to criminal penalties of up to 5 years in prison with additional financial penalties. And I'm deeply concerned that these violations are happening left and right. And those fears could be assuaged with the transparency that has been promised to us. And by the way, who is doing it? Has Marco Elez been rehired to continue working on Treasury payments? You can't tell me that a government efficiency requires self-described racists access to government's most private information. I urge everyone to support this resolution and provide much-needed transparency into why and how Musk has sought Treasury payment information and America's sensitive data. If no laws have been broken, there's nothing to hide. And the defining feature of this 119th Congress has been his abdication of responsibility, running in fear from our constitutional authority on trade, on appropriations, on national security. My number one question for my constituents is, when will your Republican colleagues step up and do their jobs? We should not continue that today. And Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time to Congressman Doge.
Thank you very much. So let's turn to the multiple efforts of Doge to invade Americans' privacy. Republicans cannot justify and have not justified for 1 second this morning why that invasion occurred. And they refuse to bring anyone. They leave the witness chair empty for us to inquire regarding what happened here and how much damage was done. So we proceed without full information, but what we do know is that first Mr. Musk sought tax information that is housed in the Treasury's Bureau of Fiscal Services. And when the former nonpartisan top career official at the Treasury Department, a trusted guardian of Americans' privacy under both Republican and Democratic presidents for more than 35 years, when he rebuffed Musk and said he wanted to protect the privacy as he had done for 3 decades, he was pushed aside. While administration officials initially testified that Doge was granted read-only, they were just going to read and invade our privacy that way, the sensitive data, they were later forced to admit that the Musketeers had both read and write. That is, they could make changes in the sensitive databases related to federal tax returns, Social Security benefits, supplemental Social Security income benefits, and pay for veterans. Not satisfied with this temporary access to American families' financial information, Musk then came for some of the even more highly guarded taxpayer data that's contained in the IRS Integrated Data Retrieval System. This is a system to which access is denied to political officials, even the IRS commissioner, the taxpayer advocate, and the IRS chief information officer. And I want to respond directly to you, Mr. Smucker, about that and your claim that there were hundreds of additional people that we wanted to have go into all this data. What we wanted was to enforce the tax laws. We wanted the tax cheats to be brought to justice. You all took the cop off the beat. But let me make this point. The data that Musk and the Musketeers are seeking, that they perhaps got exposed, is data that is so sensitive that even the IRS commissioner is not entitled to see it. That is protected data, protected until this happened. And the claim that because some of it that they got was anonymous would not get into the privacy was rebutted by Mr. Barthol when I questioned him as the head of the Joint Committee on Taxation, an independent, nonpartisan group, who explained to us how that data could be used when Mr. Musk and his AI and his minions and his Musketeers get together and compare these databases and invade our privacy. We must adopt this resolution. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Now recognize Mr. Evans to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this conversation led by Mr. Doggett.
The gentleman could speak into the microphone.
This conversation led by Mr. Doggett, I think he needs to get more. So I'd like to yield my time to Mr. Doggett.
Thank you very much for that. There are 2 laws that Mr. Musk and Doge are ignoring. They are Section 6103 of the Internal Revenue Code and the Privacy Act of 1974. Section 6103, which has been before this committee on numerous occasions, protects the confidentiality of tax returns and return information, including all of the tax return information that is received or collected by the Internal Revenue Service. The Privacy Act of 1974 was designed to provide individual Americans with more control over the government gathering, disseminating, and using our private information. What's happened to the libertarians in the Republican Party who once believed that government was a challenge and that the privacy of American citizens should be protected from the overreach of government? What we have here is an overreach without justification. Why is it necessary in fighting waste, fraud, and abuse to interfere with the personal data of American citizens, every American citizens? The issues that we have before us today are that Doge has also sought access to what are called omnibus sharing agreements. This is another aspect I've not touched on so far. And these omnibus sharing agreements would let Musk link individual tax data across a whole host of different federal agencies. A federal statute makes it unlawful for the IRS to share taxpayer data with other agencies for reasons unrelated to the administration of our tax system. New York University Tax Law Center experts indicate that such an omnibus information sharing agreement across agencies would not conform with the strict rules of 6103 that govern how and when taxpayer information can be shared. And so, again, here is an area that needs to be explored other than through an empty witness chair to find out about the extent of the violation of federal law with this sharing agreement that has been rubber stamped by the administration. And most recently, just last week, Mr. Musk came for more of Americans' private information stored in the child support database that is used to enforce court-ordered child support payments, which is a good thing. But each agency receives tax data that has a detailed data sharing agreement with IRS, and they have to comply with those taxpayer privacy protections when that goes over to the Department of Health and Human Services. Unfortunately, Health and Human Services is now run by the vaccine denier Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he, not disregarding really those requirements, he gave Doge exactly what they asked for. It's simply outrageous that Americans' private and personal financial information has not been protected from the prying eyes of an unelected billionaire and his teenage musketeers. At a bare minimum, Congress and the American people need a full accounting of what data has been shared with Musk and Doge and for what purposes. And despite all the rhetoric on the other side, we have absolutely no explanation as to why that right of Americans for a full accounting is not being provided, why it is being obstructed and blocked by the Republicans. Answers to this resolution of inquiry on behalf of all the Democrats on this committee will provide us with a little of that accounting. Only then can we begin to move forward as a bipartisan majority, as the bipartisan majority did over 50 years ago when there was criminality from another Republican president in the wake of the Watergate scandal, and address the shortcomings of the enforcement of our tax privacy law and begin to restore taxpayer trust in our voluntary tax system. The Republicans basically say they don't know and they don't care what Musk is doing with your personal tax return, your Social Security information, your health data, anything concerning child custody. And by blocking this resolution, they just want to ensure that no questions are asked and no information about this likely violation of multiple federal laws ever becomes public. That's why we should adopt this resolution, and I yield back.
Mr. Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. Thank you. So many things we've said today. We've been here mostly talking past each other on a lot of different things. Earlier it was suggested that we're missing the message of the previous election. And I think the message of the last election was it's the economy, stupid, as it's been every election. And it was pocketbook issues. It was people saying, help us. We don't want to just have an easier time making ends meet. We want to be able to get ahead and give our kids a better future. The message of the last election was not privatize Social Security, make it harder to have security and dignity in retirement. It wasn't cutting access to health care for 70 million people by slashing Medicaid. It wasn't giving up our personal data to an unelected bureaucrat, billionaire, oligarch, so he can profit off of that data and do God knows what else. So I'm proud to join my Democratic colleagues today to demand that the Trump administration and Elon Musk are providing this body, as is our responsibility, accurate information on what they are doing with the data of Americans they are capturing from the Department of Treasury.
Elon Musk and his team are unelected and unvetted. The so-called Department of Government Efficiency is accessing private systems they are doing so laden with their own personal conflicts and ethical concerns. They have no business rummaging around taxpayers' private financial data and information. Unfortunately, we're seeing at every turn, Doge is trying to access not just Treasury information, but information of all the departments that they have with our personal information, including our individual Social Security numbers, our home address, our bank account information, and so much more. Now, I know from personal experience, 20 years ago, I had my identity stolen. We caught it very quickly, likely within hours, and yet it took me years to take care of all of the implications that had. We all get notifications in the mail that this system or that system has been breached and what actions we should be taking. We should be protecting American citizens' information in this committee, and yet what I'm hearing from my colleagues on the other side is talk about fraud, waste, and abuse. We agree. Everyone on this committee says we should be looking for ways to make government more efficient and more effective, and looking for ways to put in place systems to catch and punish fraud, waste, and abuse. But we're allowing unelected officials to access personal identity that can give them great power over the American people, and used improperly can cause great damage. The systems at the Department of Treasury contain sensitive, extensive details about all of our individuals' lives. Now, Elon Musk wants you to think that he is a patriot, but he is far from it. He is not interested in keeping that private data safe. In fact, we suspect he is more interested in using that private data to enrich himself. Allowing unvetted and inexperienced personnel to access this system is a recipe for disaster, leaving taxpayers' sensitive information vulnerable, either by Doge or by external actors. What we're asking today, and I am astonished that my colleagues are not joining us in this on the other side of the aisle, what we are asking for today is that the American people understand and know with confidence what Doge's access of their personal information and how they are using it. It's that simple. Since my Republican colleagues refuse to apply the normal standards of transparency to Doge, we are forced to do so with this resolution today. And if I can extend to other things that might have been said, that were said earlier, we did scream out loud and vociferously when people accessed information. My colleagues suggested that employees at the IRS have access to our personal tax records. Some have access to some records when they have a necessary reason to do so. They can't rummage through the system. We had a hearing in this committee talking about that. No one has access to everything over there until last month when Elon Musk and his Doge bros, young people who lack experience, are exuding in overconfidence and believe they know more than the elected officials sitting on this body, they have access to it today. We should all be upset. And I am astonished by the silence, the acquiescence, the submissiveness of my Republican colleagues to let the executive branch to do the responsibilities that should be our responsibility assigned to us in the Constitution, in this committee. And I wish we could join together to ask for this information to protect the American people. I yield back.
Oh, can I have your 4 seconds?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Schneider, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a unanimous consent request to place in the record the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which really elucidates the right of confidentiality and privacy.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for the extra time.
Mr. Gomez. Mr. Horsford.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. I move to strike their last word. To the American people, I want you to hear this. Today, we are voting for transparency in government. There is only one person who's unelected and a bureaucrat who is causing havoc throughout the government. That is Elon Musk and his hackers. Now, my constituents need and want to know who accessed their sensitive data and for what purpose. I want you to know that this inquiry specifically states that within 14 days, the President provide and direct to the Department of the Treasury, to the House of Representatives, all communications related to the access to or the use of the Treasury payment system by Doge, Elon Musk, or any member of his team. It also calls for the access to or use of confidential tax returns or tax return information by Doge, Elon Musk, or a member of his team, and any screenshots taken of the data or records in the Treasury payment system by Doge, Elon Musk, or a member of his team. This is common sense. This resolution of inquiry is simple. We are doing our duty as elected members of Congress. I don't work for Elon Musk, and he wasn't elected to do anything on behalf of the American people. So I'm asking for simple information, information that should be shared with Congress. Now, to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I want to work with you on government efficiency. There's several of you that we are actually in those efforts involved with. I want to be able to identify ways to make government work for the working people of this country. But there's a way to do it, and this is not it. Chaos only breeds further chaos, and my constituents are scared, they're worried, they're concerned about their personal information being used by Elon Musk and his hackers. From Pahrump to Mesquite, my office has received calls from constituents concerned about their information being stolen, and they have a right to know by whom and for what purpose. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. My constituents deserve to know why an unelected bureaucrat, Elon Musk, who is the richest person in the world, and his hackers are illegally accessing tax data, Social Security information, bank information. Why do they have it, and what is the purpose? That is the purpose of this inquiry. I am defending the rights of my constituents to know what has been accessed, by whom, and for what purpose. I don't understand, for the life of me, how my colleagues on the other side would not support this resolution. I'm here to defend my constituents. That's what I was elected to do. Elon Musk, you were elected to do absolutely nothing. Get your grubby hands off of the data of the people of America and the information that they're entitled to remain confidential. With that, I yield back.
Ms. Van Dyne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Democrats keep criticizing Republicans for not bringing Elon Musk as a witness to speak about Doge's work. If my Democrat colleagues want to bring Mr. Musk in for a witness so badly, why don't they invite him to appear as a witness? Democrats are allowed to invite anyone as a witness who can answer their questions about Doge. Has anybody actually invited him? Okay, we have not seen any of that. During the Oversight Subcommittee's hearing on February 11th, Democrats invited Nina Olson as a witness. You had an opportunity. You chose Nina Olson as a witness. And you asked her several questions about Doge having access to taxpayer information. Republicans invited Christine Kochelek, a managing director for a financial management insurance team at GAO's office. She was there specifically for the purpose of answering questions related to access to Treasury's payment systems. And when I asked her directly, has any proof been shown about these threats? You know what she said? None. No. And yet we continue to hear all of these unsubstantiated charges being thrown out, even though my colleagues know they're not correct. They're complete lies. Democrats are always able to invite whoever they want for a witness hearing. They just haven't done it. And Democrats have expressed outrage over the access to taxpayer information that Doge employees have. First off, a few weeks ago, the Treasury Department in the White House signed a memorandum of understanding that prohibits Doge from accessing personal taxpayer data. They know this, and yet we've spent over an hour and 45 minutes listening to charges that they know, again, are lies. Second, the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration has released data on just how many individuals have already had access to sensitive information within the IRS. As of July 2023, over 91,000 business entitlement access request system users, 91,000, including 5,000 contractors, had access to at least one sensitive IRS system. Where's the outrage? Why are we just now hearing about this? All these unelected bureaucrats that have access to sensitive information, including 5,000 contractors, you're saying shouldn't. And yet, because Elon Musk has unmasked all of this waste, fraud, and abuse, now you're bringing it up. Even worse, TIJTA found that over a dozen contractors with unfavorable background investigations retained their access to at least one sensitive IRS system because the IRS did not take action to suspend or disable the contractors from the IRS system as required. Where was the outrage then? So if Democrats were serious about protecting taxpayer information, they would have raised concerns about this report and articles that ProPublica and the New York Times published using illegally obtained taxpayer information to publish stories attacking President Trump and other Americans who had their data stolen. Instead of raising concerns then, Democrats chose to weaponize the disclosure of taxpayer information, including President Trump's, to attack him and other Americans for political gain. So stop with the gaslighting and protecting the waste, fraud, and abuse that is being uncovered, and stand up for your constituents and protect their financial futures. With that, I yield.
Ms. Plaskett.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a point of parliamentary inquiry?
Or Mr. Yes. You want to
Point of parliamentary inquiry, then I'll do the strike of the last word.
Okay.
Point of parliamentary inquiry. Is there a mechanism where the committee could compel Mr. Musk to come and testify before the committee? Because we are happy, I think Democrats would be happy to support that motion or that mechanism if the majority is willing to oblige us. But we are happy to do it.
We'll take it under advisement. You're recognized to strike the last word.
All right, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. So Ways and Means Democrats are demanding answers and fighting to protect taxpayers' privacy and access to their Social Security benefits. Elon Musk's Doge has pushed for access to sensitive systems that hold private data on millions of Americans. These include the essential system the government uses to pay its bills, database that stores tax return and Social Security data used to set and pay Social Security benefits. These databases include highly sensitive information, including taxpayers' Social Security numbers, addresses, income information, debts, and property records. Republicans are letting an unelected billionaire ransack our government. It's not just dangerous, it's potentially illegal. We need to know what information Musk has access and what Doge has done with people's personal information, especially if Musk tech bros have stolen information for unauthorized purposes. President Trump has made it clear there will be no guardrails or oversight on Elon Musk, and his department and agency heads are being forced to get in line. That's why we have inspector generals to prevent fraud, but Trump has fired them all. If the Trump administration won't hold Musk accountable, Congress must. Congress has the power to conduct oversight on the executive branch, and it is our duty to protect taxpayer and Social Security information. That is what Democrats are trying to do today. We have 2 resolutions of inquiry before the committee, and all they do is demand information regarding Doge's intrusions at Treasury, IRS, and the Social Security Administration. We're asking whether Musk and his team access protected information like Social Security numbers and benefit information, addresses, tax debts, wage records, and bank information. We need to find out what's going on. But we can only do this if our Republican colleagues join us. And that's what we're asking them to do, to join us. Republicans either, in my opinion, either don't want to know what's going on, don't care what's going on, or are too scared of Musk to do anything about it. And trust me, I get it. Musk has a $500 billion baseball bat that he's willing to use electorally to make sure that any of you who step out of line, he puts you back in your place quickly. So I get it. I get why you're scared. I get why you're not protecting the tax information and Social Security information of millions of Americans. I get it. But we need you to have courage. We need you to step up. We need you to actually protect your constituents. Because what's going to happen is when Elon Musk does all the damage and he's gone, you will be holding the bag. And then there'll be no one there to protect you. So don't let him bully you guys into not doing your jobs. We need you to do your jobs. And listen, I get it. It's basic math. You have more votes than us. You can vote anything down that you want. But we need you all to step up and protect the American taxpayer. With that, I yield back.
Mr. Swazi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of back and forth here about a lot of different things. It's hard to figure out what to focus on. I think we all want to try and get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse in government. It's a major problem. It's going to require us to work together, less finger-pointing. It would be great if we could get Mr. Musk to come in here and outline different ideas he has for cuts, and then we could vote on it through what's called the rescission process. That would be a great thing if we could. Mr. Chairman, I know you're going to take it under advisement, but it would be great if we could get Mr. Musk to just come here and sit here and lay out the different cuts that he thinks that should be made to the federal government. I think, there's a lot of back and forth here. Mr. Smucker was talking earlier about the deficits. I mean, we just voted yesterday. You guys voted yes. We voted no on a budget with $6.75 trillion in expenses and only $4.9 trillion in revenues. You voted yesterday for a massive deficit increasing budget. In addition, the big, beautiful bill that everybody's talking about is going to increase the federal deficit by even more, $3 trillion, because there's $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, but there's only about $1.5 trillion proposed in expense cuts. And those $1.5 trillion in expense cuts can't be made unless you cut Medicaid. And you said you don't want to cut Medicaid. So that's an additional, even under those rosy scenarios, an additional $3 trillion in deficits. So I don't know what you guys are talking about. You want to cut things, but you won't give us the specifics as to what's being done. Mr. Musk is operating. Ms. Van Dyne talked about the witnesses that were here the other day. I asked each of the witnesses specifically, do you know what Mr. Musk is doing? Do you know if I think you said 100 people are working for him, Lloyd? 100 people are working for Musk, I think you said? But I mean, did they get background checks? Do we know that? Do you know, I'll yield to Mr. Smucker. Do you know if they got background checks? No, you don't know. Nobody knows. We don't know if they got background checks. We don't know what kind of security clearances they have. We don't know what their backgrounds are. I mean, these are simple, basic questions in running a multi-trillion-dollar organization. Are the people that you have, and we hear different names about them, but they're young people that are gamers and hackers and computer experts. We don't know what their backgrounds are. We don't know if they got proper security clearances. We don't know if they have background checks. So we've got a big problem in the federal government. We've got way more in expenses than we have in revenues. It causes deficits. Our deficits are the highest percentage of our GDP than it's been in decades. The proposal, the CR that was passed yesterday increases the deficit. The big, beautiful bill that this group is proposing will dramatically increase the deficit. So you say we have to find expenses to cut. We need to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. Yes, let's do that. But we don't know what the expenses are that they're proposing. They're supposed to come before the Congress and propose specific cuts so that we can adjudge whether that makes sense. I don't think anybody here supports the idea when they cut the people that oversaw the nuclear stockpile. Nobody thought it was a good idea. Nobody thought it was a good idea when they cut the people that oversee the avian flu. Nobody thought it was a good idea when they cut the people that oversee a measles outbreak. Nobody thought those were good ideas. I don't think anybody here is going to think it's a good idea when they're cutting thousands and thousands and thousands of employees at Social Security, so that when people start calling up Social Security and they can't get their calls answered, and then you guys are going to say, look at that, I told you it was broken, but you want to cut 10,000 employees out of the 54,000 that are there. And then there's going to be an argument, like there's been in the past, to privatize Social Security. So let's just work together. Let's say we all want to try and balance the budget. We all want to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. To do that, we have a process and procedure in place for the federal government. You can't do it through impoundment. That's been ruled by the courts, and there's laws specifically passed by Congress that you can't do it that way. You have to go through the rescission process. So to come and make a proposal, I want to cut this, I want to cut that, I want to cut this, I want to cut that, this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, and then we decide yes or no based upon those individual things. It's a process that you're supposed to go through. It's not supposed to be done in the dark by some 20-year-old kids that we don't know if they got background checks or not. So let's all work together and try and accomplish our common goals of trying to make our country a better place. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Neal.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word, Mr. Chairman. I want to recognize Ms. Chu, first of all, for a unanimous consent request.
Yes, I have a unanimous consent request. Ms. Van Dyne said that we hadn't asked Mr. Musk to appear before the committee, and I have here a letter of February 6, 2025, over a month ago, signed by Congressmember Gwen Moore and myself, asking Secretary Bessent and the head of Doge, Mr. Elon Musk, to appear before the committee.
Without objection.
And I yield the balance of my time to Mr. Doggett.
Thank you very much. Today's resolution and our consideration is not the first time we've sought this information. On February 5th, every Democrat on this committee wrote to the Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Bessent, and the acting commissioner, Mr. O'Donnell, at the Internal Revenue Service, and asked for the same information we are seeking today. Very same facts that we sought from them over a month and a half ago. Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent to put these letters into the record.
Without objection.
And as Ms. Chu just pointed out, the next day, February the 6th, after a meeting with Speaker Johnson, they affirmed in their letter, Ms. Chu and Ms. Moore, members of this committee, that they were looking forward to having Mr. Musk here and others from Doge, because we had an oversight committee set for a meeting to explore these matters. We're promised that that witness would appear. And so who came? Several witnesses who, when questioned, indicated they didn't have any facts. They could say that Doge had done nothing because they knew nothing. And so here we are 6 weeks later. This resolution was originally presented to the committee on February the 12th, our third attempt to get this information. And yet nothing has been forthcoming. And this morning we hear, I must say, the very laughable suggestion that the reason Mr. Musk is not here is because Democrats didn't ask him. That just doesn't meet a test of the least bit of credibility. It is as incredible as some of the things that President Trump has been telling us, like his false claims, really his lie, that people who were of advanced years, 125, 150, 350 years, were getting Social Security, all done to discredit Social Security. What is at stake with our privacy? Well, Mr. Schneider pointed out that one of the issues here is the danger of identity theft, a serious danger that many Americans have experienced, the horror of having their identity stolen and finding out they have to undo everything that affects their life because this has happened. And here we have a group of musketeers who couldn't even protect their own website from being hacked, and yet they may have access to extensive private information. The second concern I've raised is about tax payments, that people in my district and across the country are submitting far fewer tax returns than they did last year this time, because many of them are concerned that their data will be exposed. And privacy overall. There was a time that the Republican Party cared about the privacy of individual Americans, thought that government overreach was a problem, opposed to national identification cards and other ways that might be intrusions on Americans. Well, let me tell you what data that Musk and the Musketeers were accessing. Information about every single wage earner in this country and their employer. Wages, employer tax identification numbers, Social Security numbers, verified dates of unemployment insurance, Social Security records. And what they have told us this morning, other than these laughable suggestions, is that the only way that they, as Republicans in this new administration, can fight waste, fraud, and abuse is to expose the information, the private information of American citizens across this country. The only way they can fight waste, fraud, and abuse is to invade individual privacy and to give it to people like the 25-year-old self-described racist who expressed particular disdain for South Asians who are great members of our country, to give it to that kind of person to do with what they may. That is wrong, and this resolution of inquiry does not slow the effort of fighting waste, fraud, and abuse. It does advance the effort of protecting the privacy of every single American, and I urge its adoption.
Thank you. Are there additional members who wish to strike the last word? Seeing none, are there any amendments to the resolution? Seeing none, I will now recognize Mr. Buchanan for the purpose of offering a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee report H.Res. 127 adversely to the House of Representatives.
The question is on the motion to report H.Res. 127 adversely to the House of Representatives. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Buchanan.
Yes.
Mr. Buchanan, yes. Mr. Smith of Nebraska.
Yes.
Mr. Smith of Nebraska, yes. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, yes. Mr. Schweikert. Yes. Mr. Schweikert, yes. Mr. LaHood. Mr. Arrington. Mr. Estes. Mr. Estes, yes. Mr. Smucker. Mr. Smucker, yes. Mr. Hearn. Yes. Mr. Hearn, yes. Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller, yes. Dr. Murphy. Dr. Murphy, yes. Mr. Kustoff. Mr. Kustoff, yes. Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. Fitzpatrick, yes. Mr. Stubbe. Mr. Stubbe, yes. Miss Tinney. Miss Tinney, yes. Ms. Fishbach. Yes. Ms. Fishbach, yes. Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore, yes. Ms. Van Dyne. Ms. Van Dyne, yes. Mr. Feenstra. Mr. Feenstra, yes. Ms. Malliotakis. Ms. Malliotakis, yes. Mr. Carey. Mr. Carey, yes. Mr. Yakum. Mr. Yakum, yes. Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, yes. Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean, yes. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, yes. Mr. Neal. Mr. Neal, no. Mr. Doggett. Mr. Doggett, no. Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, no. Mr. Larson. Mr. Larson, no. Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis, no. Ms. Sanchez. Ms. Sanchez, no. Ms. Sewell. Ms. Delbene. Ms. Delbene, no. Ms. Chu. Ms. Chu, no. Ms. Moore. Ms. Moore, no. Mr. Boyle. Mr. Byer. Mr. Byer, no. Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans, no. Mr. Schneider. Mr. Schneider, no. Mr. Panetta. Mr. Panetta, no. Mr. Gomez. Mr. Gomez, no. Mr. Horsford. Mr. Horsford, no. Ms. Plaskett. Ms. Plaskett, no. Mr. Swazi. Mr. Swazi, no. Mr. LaHood. Mr. LaHood, yes. Mr. Arrington.
How is Ms. Sewell recorded?
Ms. Sewell is not recorded. Ms. Sewell, no. Mr. Boyle. Chairman Smith?
Yes.
Chairman Smith, yes.
Clerk will report the vote.
The yeses are 25, the noes are 18.
There being 25 yeses and 18 noes, the motion is agreed to, and H.Res. 127 is ordered unfavorably reported to the House. Without objection, members have 2 additional days to file with the committee clerk supplemental additional dissenting or minority views. Last November, the American people overwhelmingly rejected the Biden administration's efforts to put Washington and its bureaucrats ahead of everyday Americans. From canceling appointments for more than 7,500 Americans to give Social Security Administration employees an afternoon off, to signing a midnight agreement to lock in telework with SSA's largest union, Biden's Social Security Commissioner did everything he could to boost bureaucrats at the expense of the American people, all in the midst of a customer service crisis that saw the highest initial disability backlog and some of the highest customer service wait times in the SSA's almost 90-year history. That was before Doge. This was the Biden administration. In contrast, President Trump promised to increase the efficiency and accountability of Washington's entrenched bureaucracy. The president made no secret about how he was going to accomplish that by tasking the Department of Government Efficiency to aggressively seek out inefficiencies in agencies and places where services could be better streamlined for the American public in order to get a faster, more responsive government for their needs. It is a fact that waste and fraud exist at the SSA. And in the end, that hurts the Americans seeking help from that agency. In August of 2024, the SSA's Office of the Inspector General found $72 billion in improper payments by the agency between 2015 and 2022. President Trump knows that protecting Social Security includes rooting out fraud and waste to ensure that the right benefit is paid to the right person at the right time. This should be something everyone supports. However, some Democrats would prefer to obstruct these efforts to score political points. Fortunately, not only has the SSA been transparent with both Congress and the public with its service delivery data and the changes being made to shift the SSA from an agency that uses decades-old business practices to one that can provide modern, quality service to the public, but one of the first public statements of President Trump's new acting commissioner was to confirm that Doge personnel cannot make changes to agency systems, to commit to abide by court rulings related to Doge's access, and to refer Doge personnel for prosecution if they violate the law. The same laws that protect the American people's data from misuse by the SSA's tens of thousands of other employees. Seniors are already seeing the benefit of doing things differently. Beneficiaries affected by WEP and GPO are getting the back payments mandated by the Social Security Fairness Act faster than expected. Originally, the Social Security Administration estimated it would take 1,000 work hours to send out back payments. In a letter to Social Security, Chairman Ron Estes and myself wrote to SSA, and I quote, "We estimate that it will take about 1,000 work hours to process the actions required under the new law for the approximate 3.2 million affected beneficiaries. Our initial analysis indicates that much of the work will need to be done manually on a case-by-case basis." Since that letter from SSA was sent in January, the Trump administration's embrace of automation and technology has made a night and day difference for those affected seniors. Under President Trump, the SSA has already sent more than 71% of all back payments to the 3.2 million affected beneficiaries. This is how the agency should work. Not wait 1,000 man-hours to do 3.2 million cases hand by hand, but automation to deliver for the American people, and President Trump, in fact, has delivered that in 7 weeks. 7 weeks. The agency quickly implements the laws to get benefits in the hands of Americans as soon as possible. We shouldn't be holding out. While Democrats may want to use scaremongering to score political points, the facts are not on their side. They simply aren't. President Trump did not touch Social Security benefits during his first term. He campaigned on protecting and preserving his Social Security benefits in his first reelect, and his second reelect. In all those campaigns, he has been consistent. And for any member of this body to say otherwise is just saying unfactual representation of President Trump. I now recognize the ranking member from Massachusetts, Mr. Neal, for his opening
Thanks,
statement.
Mr. Chairman. And just before I yield my time, can we all agree that there is nobody 300 years old receiving a Social Security check? Can we also agree that 99.2% of Social Security recipients receive their checks on time, and 72 million Americans receive Social Security, and we're complaining about 1,000 hours of man and woman power? Members of Congress spend a lot of their time making sure those checks are on time. The head of Doge has said that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and the president has not corrected him. I yield the balance of my time to Mr. Larson for his great work on Social Security.
Thank you, Mr. Neal, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said earlier, it's a sad day for America when the Committee of Cognizance has to have this issue of inquiry so that we can actually produce before the committee, instead of an empty seat and empty chairs, the person who President Trump has designated to find $2 trillion worth of cuts, a person who has publicly said that he knows where to find those. They're in what he calls entitlements. What everybody on this committee knows with regard to Social Security is an earned benefit that they pay. And so the people in your districts are wondering whether or not, because the chairman just said that there's no way that President Trump is going to touch Social Security, even though last weekend he called it a scam, and that Elon Musk was on television just last night again saying that, yes, their goal is to privatize Social Security. Given these statements, I don't understand why there's a problem with bringing forth Mr. Musk to testify before this committee. And if he's got all these ideas of fraud, abuse, and waste are true, then yes, Mr. Chairman, we should join with you to make sure that that's the case. But even the acting person handpicked by Trump has said, well, what they said about people receiving checks older than 115 years old is false. That's Trump appointment saying that. And so we continue to get the big lie, including this weekend again, where they said, oh yes, and the Democratic plan is to bring illegal immigrants into the country by offering to pay them Social Security. There's not a thread of truth to any of that. And yet, this unaccountable person, not a federal employee, not a volunteer, but a special person who's not had to go on through Senate approval, and who this committee is now saying, yes, we agree with the president, he should not be accountable. He should be able to have free reign and do whatever he wants. We will willingly follow him and do whatever he says because he's the wealthiest man in the world, and surely he must know how to save us from ourselves. This program of Social Security that, just happens to be the #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly and for the children of this country. Yep, I agree, Mr. Musk and Mr. Trump aren't going to lose a moment's sleep thinking about the privatization and what it means to those individuals. And yes, you can say that he's not going to do this, but yet there's no commissioner here, no person under oath raising their hand and saying, yes, no, we have no intention of privatizing Social Security. He's made it clear time and time again. And if not, well, by all means, we'll be happy to have him here. We've sent letters. Chairman Esty knows 3 weeks ago I sent a letter asking for him to come immediately before the subcommittee. And we'll continue to do that because we want to hear, as does the American public, the truth.
Thank you. The committee will now proceed to consideration of H.Res. 195. Without objection, the measure will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Does anyone wish to strike the last word? Mr. Buchanan is recognized.
Mr. Larson, you've been maybe a little longer than I have, but the two of us came in 2006 when they started PAYGO. I ran on a balanced budget amendment or trying to get there. We're $8 trillion in debt. Here's what's sad, and here's where we go broke, so if we don't deal with it. It was $8 trillion when we came in. Today, $37 trillion. It's not your fault, it's not our fault, it's both parties. I don't have any confidence that we can deal with this. I sadly say that. I'm just telling you from my standpoint, because you would have dealt with it a long time ago. I've had expert economists tell me it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So do we want to go down this false road where we haven't been able to perform on a bipartisan basis or get anything done? Or do we want to try to look at other options? And I feel like at least we got a shot. Because I can just tell you when you're paying $1 trillion in interest.
Will the gentleman
$1 trillion in interest, just give me a couple minutes. When you're paying $1 trillion in interest right off the top, it's going to end badly. And I just feel, I'm an optimist. Anybody that knows me, I am. But I am very, very concerned about the debt and the deficit. And it's both parties. I have no confidence in this process, what we've been doing for all these years, because I've never seen anybody talk about dealing with the reality of a budget. I dealt with balance sheets and income statements. At some point, you go bankrupt. And that's my point. We're doing that right now. Regardless what happens here today, regardless what road going, if we don't make material changes, Social Security's at risk. I got the 5th oldest district in the country. Putting them all at risk. Medicare, Medicaid is at risk. Everything's at risk. We've got to fix this thing. We've got to fix it together, Because I can just tell you, it's hard to imagine my 10th term here. I get sick of hearing it. Everybody talks a good game, but we don't do anything. But for the sake of the American people, and I feel your passion. I know we talked about Social Security. I was on the committee, but we've got to do whatever we can to fix what we're doing because, you got to either go down the road we've been going down, which I have no confidence, or you look at another road, and I think this other road gives us at least a shot. We don't have a shot right now. This will give us a shot because we don't have the courage to come together. And I'll yield.
Well, I thank the gentleman. It was always a gentleman. But what we need, and for more than 50 years, you're right, both parties share responsibility in this. But here's what we need: a vote. How about a vote? We have a plan. Where's yours? And how can you get to a compromise if there's a plan and no plan? How about a vote then? How about the American people get to see where you stand on the issue? And as has been articulated by several on the other side, we just simply don't believe that this program can last or make it. I totally believe that this is America's number one. In fact, we borrow from Social Security. Yes, your time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me just say, I would wish that we could come together and deal with this. It's the biggest problem we've got. We're financially going down the drain. I don't care who you talk to or what you talk to. I hate to say that because it's the best country on the planet, but we've got to fix our financial house. We've got to fix it together because if we don't, we're going to end up in a very, very bad situation. Someone says when that might be, who knows, but it's coming. It's coming quickly. You can't pay $1 trillion off the top without impacting everybody. And Social Security, that's not the employees, it's their money, plus all the employers matched them half. So this is their money, it's at risk. There's no trust fund for it. They took all the monies out in the 60s in terms of Social Security. So they're counting on the viability of America.
That's not true.
Okay, well, that's kind of what I understood. But
Well, that's not true at all. In fact, the federal government borrows from Social Security.
I'm going to yield back, so yeah, I'll reclaim my time. Thank you. Yield back.
Mr. Neal.
Thanks, Chairman. I move to strike the last word. So I heard the gentleman's argument, and I think it's very sincere. But what's missing is, in the next few weeks, we will be asked to add $4 trillion to the debt because of tax cuts. That's the great irony or inconsistency of this argument. So let me give you a name here. Bill Clinton balanced the budget 4 times, and then tax cuts in 2001 and 2003. We're being asked for big tax cuts again here in the next few weeks, but under the guise that we're going to balance the budget with more tax cuts? The numbers don't work. And incidentally, for the record, Social Security right now is running a surplus of $2.7 trillion. That's a fact. And I call attention to that because happy to have the discussion about balancing the budget. Some of us actually participated, cast some really tough votes for spending cuts and tax increases twice. Bush Sr., Clinton twice, cuts and tax increases to balance the budget, and it worked. The answer from the other side is if we just have more tax cuts, just add more to the debt, that somehow the debt shrinks? I mean, the consistency of the argument here is that more tax cuts will balance the budget. And then we'll camouflage it by borrowing $4 trillion that we will be asked to take up here as we lift the debt ceiling once again. I'm all in for a sincere conversation about how to get there. If the other side is sincere about it, let's engage the conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All Americans know that President Trump has pledged to protect Social Security, just as he has pledged tariffs, and they've been on one day and off the next, just as he has gone back and forth on his position on reproductive freedom for women in this country. And so why do I question the commitment to Social Security? Because I think it's more important to look not at a president who is well known as a man of his last word, by what he says, but by what he does. And what he has done is to appoint a man who has called Social Security a Ponzi scheme, who this week has attacked the programs that Americans pay into in every paycheck, Medicare and Social Security, as being entitlements. Yes, you should be entitled to what you pay into over your work life for your Medicare and your Social Security, but he says it's a Ponzi scheme and that entitlements are the place to cut. So that's the first place. The person he chose to raid Social Security does not believe in Social Security. Number two is that we have seen this president come, not unlike the chairman of the committee this morning, but provoking much more extended laughter from Republicans in his recent speech to Congress. And what was this laughter about? All the fraud at Social Security. Can you imagine? They have on their payout someone who has 350 years old, older than our republic. Can you believe this? No, you can't believe it because it's a lie. Because Social Security has had in place for some time a requirement that it doesn't pay out anything to people over 115. And though there have been some mistakes made, some underpayments, some overpayments, it has, as Mr. Neal pointed out, an incredible accuracy rate of far less of 1% of payments that have been found to be improper. It doesn't mean we shouldn't seek more accuracy and protect the system, but Social Security has worked remarkably well in the past. And that takes me to the third thing that President Trump has done that is inconsistent with his claim that he will protect Social Security and won't switch his word around as he has done on one public issue after another, and that is the determined effort of this administration to wreck the Social Security Administration. Those checks don't come down as manna from heaven. They come down because there is a dedicated workforce that is ensuring that Social Security continues to pay out month after month. And so how have Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk decided to handle that dedicated workforce? They are cutting it by 7,000 people. And among those 7,000 people are 50 that are particularly important. The Office of Transformation, as they have called it, is the customer service office at the Social Security Administration. And the Trump administration went in and fired the director of the Office of Transformation. He fired all 50 employees of that Office of Transformation. So guess what? When the shortage of employees to get the checks out dependably occurs, people are going to say, well, Social Security is just not like it used to be. It can't deliver. It's not working. It's like the post office, which they want to privatize. It's not getting our checks. We can't count on it anymore. And it's that assuring that the Social Security Administration fails to deliver that is at the core of the Republican plan to undermine Social Security. Social Security has been forced already by Republican administration to serve millions more people with fewer staff. In 2010, they had 67,000 workers ensuring timely and accurate payments to 60 million Americans. Today, they have 10,000 fewer, and when I say today, that's before the Trump cuts, serving 13 million more people. You cannot assure that Social Security provides the wonderful coverage that it has for so many years without an adequate workforce. I'm hearing from constituents that say this is an emergency. I'm hearing Republicans like Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, saying he wants to sunset altogether. Senator Mike Lee, who says he wants to phase out Social Security, to pull it out by the roots and get rid of it. My constituents believe Social Security is one of the best systems government ever put in place, and we are opposed to the Trump people undermining it as they are doing and want to get the facts here, which is all this resolution asks for. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I recognize Mr. Estes to strike the last word.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. You know, as the new chair of the Social Security Subcommittee, I feel a sense of responsibility to make sure we address this. this program that's so beneficial for so many people in the country. I mean, this is a federal program that supports people of all ages, particularly our seniors. And the Social Security Administration's first responsibility is to provide correct benefit payments to the correct people in a timely basis. People should be enrolled correctly and timely. That's not happening today. Over the last 2 years, my office has received increasing number of complaints. And I would imagine that most of the members on this dais are also receiving more complaints, that their constituents aren't being served in a timely and efficient manner. The complaints range from Social Security, they can't get enrolled, they can't get through on the phone system, they can't get appointments set up either through the phone system or through technology, they can't get into an office. This is one of those simple blocking and tackling things. We want to make sure that we have good customer service. That's not talking anything about some of the problems that have been discovered with the processing itself. In fact, the Social Security Administration's Inspector General Office has found that $72 billion in improper payments between 2015 and 2022. And the previous administration, the administrator said, well, we'll just start forgiving those and we'll stop calculating whether they are bad payments, just so that we don't have such a bad record. I want to go on the record that President Trump has repeatedly stated that he will fight for Social Security, that President Trump's repeatedly stated he will protect Social Security, President Trump's repeatedly stated that he will not cut Social Security, and House Republicans stand with President Trump to make sure that we preserve and protect and strengthen Social Security benefits for the seniors count on. I talked mostly in my remarks about how do we make sure that the program's processed correctly. The other issue that we need to address is the fact that Social Security is running a deficit. They've been running a deficit each year since 2010. We have to, at some point in time, be the adults in the room and address the fact that the trust fund is being depleted. That's because there are more retirees than workers today than ever before in history. So if we really want to solve this problem, let's work together. We need to address the problems with customer service today, and the sooner we take up and address our responsibility to resolve the deficit that exists in the program, this program is not going to be able to provide the service that it was created for the American people. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Thompson to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 89 years ago, President Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act into law, creating the single most impactful anti-poverty program in our nation's history. For 89 years, Social Security has ensured our seniors can retire with dignity, and those who are disabled can have the support that they need. Yet this administration has put Social Security on the chopping block. They want to privatize Social Security. Elon Musk has called it the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time and has suggested it will be the primary target of his cutting efforts. My colleague mentioned that the Republicans' sole purpose, focus is to improve customer services. Well, it's interesting because these cuts that have already coming out of the administration are already in the works. Doge announcing the closure of 47 field offices and 6 regional offices. How does that improve customer service? Career professional staff and former administrators of Social Security have warned that for the first time in 80 years, benefits may be disrupted. Mr. Chairman, my phones have been ringing off the hook from calls from constituents frightened that they won't receive their benefits. In my district, 153,000 people receive Social Security. Over 120,000 retirees, over 6,000 children, 8,000 widows, and over 12,000 disabled workers. And this amounts to $286 million every month coming into my district from Social Security checks. And that multiplies across our community, improving the economic situation at home. And that's the same for everybody on this dais. The multiplier effect of these Social Security checks coming into your community can make or break your local economy. I understand why my Republican colleagues have canceled their town halls and refused to answer questions, refused to bring witnesses in. They know that what they're doing is wildly unpopular, since 87% of Americans say supporting Social Security should be a top priority for Congress. The American public deserves to know. They're demanding to know what this administration plans to do with Social Security. If this administration claims to be the most transparent in history, why are our Republican colleagues not interested in voting to ensure that that transparency is in effect with this resolution? Mr. Chairman, this is the most significant committee in Congress. Please exercise the authority you have to ensure that Americans know what the future of their Social Security holds. And I yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Larson.
Just briefly, because I wanted to, I have great admiration for the chairman of the Social Security Subcommittee and his demeanor and how he always conducts himself. And we did send a letter, asking for Elon Musk to be here. And I know the gentleman's sincere when he says we've got to work together to solve this. We do. So we have a plan. Let's put it out there and have a vote. If you've got a plan, by all means, put it out there. It seems like the person who has a plan is Elon Musk. And that's why we've asked that he come before here to please explain to us what his plan is. I don't see where that is such an astounding thing to ask for in a democracy and in a democratic republic. We have a plan. You disagree with it? That's fine. That's what a democracy is all about. Are there improvements that could be made? Of course, there always are. Are there compromises that could be made? Certainly. But to do nothing and then to stonewall and say that Elon Musk doesn't have to come before us, let's have Martin O'Malley in, the commissioner, so we can actually look at what other federal agency do you know that operates the largest insurance program for under 1% administrative costs and laying off people that reach out to people, especially in rural areas, and shutting those down so that they can't get the service they need, and then calling Social Security incompetent?
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Davis is now recognized. Strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, as I listen to this discussion, and I've listened all morning, I'm reminded that my father used to tell me that what you do is far more telling than what you say. And so we hear that, no, we're not going to affect Social Security. It's hard to make me believe that if you are closing offices, if you are firing staff. There's nothing more important in my congressional district than Social Security, especially to the more than 150,000 seniors whose only source of income is Social Security. The individuals with disabilities whose only source of income is Social Security. And yet, there seems to be this notion that we can fix it by laying people off, cutting staff, closing offices. It's just hard for me to reconcile that and understand it. Social Security is the lifeline for all of these individuals, and it's the only protection that they have from absolute poverty. Absolute poverty. And the notion of privatization, I would much rather rely upon a proven system than some undeveloped, untried, never put together system that would simply allow hedge funds, private investors, and those who operate big businesses to make more money at the expense of the people that the services ought to be provided for. And it's for that reason that I think any changes, any thoughts, any ideas, any practices must be transparent. I agree with those who say we can fix. Of course we can. Of course we can. All that we have to do is fix with the intent of providing the best possible service to the residents and the people. I also believe that if there is righteousness in the heart, there's also beauty in the character, which means that if the intent is righteous, then we'll have a system that will work for the benefit of the people. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. I now recognize Ms. Sanchez to strike the last word. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This resolution of inquiry asks about staff reductions, closures, and consolidations of Social Security offices. The implementation of the so-called Department of Government Efficiency has caused widespread confusion and chaos. Illegal mass firings of federal workers and cancellation of grants have left my constituents looking for answers. I expect my colleagues have experienced similar questions from their constituents if they are bothering to hear them out. I would expect all of my colleagues to vote yes on this resolution of inquiry, if only to gather much needed information about Elon Musk's actions in the Social Security Administration. Doge's website lists Social Security field office closures in Carlsbad, California, Abilene, Texas, Greenville, North Carolina, and Logan, West Virginia. If it was me representing these cities, I would want more details about why my constituents were losing these valuable services. We all know that Social Security wait times are too long. Office closures will only increase them. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The richest man in the world is going after Social Security, and he doesn't even understand it, doesn't know how it works. Elon Musk calls Social Security a Ponzi scheme, and because of the cap, Elon Musk paid all of his Social Security taxes on January 1st of this year at 12:15 a.m. He doesn't have to pay a dime more into Social Security after that. My Republican colleagues are smart, compassionate people. I have a hard time believing that they are comfortable slashing the benefits that their constituents rely on. And I have a harder time believing that they don't want to understand what the richest man in the world is doing with their constituents' money and data. This resolution simply asks the question. I look forward to all my colleagues voting yes to find out more about what is happening in their districts. And I want to just say this. At the start of this markup, I had one of my staff call the Social Security customer service line. We've been discussing this resolution for quite some time now, and she's still on hold. Closing Social Security field offices and reducing staff is only going to increase those hold times for our most vulnerable, I should say. All constituents are valuable, but our most vulnerable constituents. And Republicans don't seem to care, but I suspect that your constituents will. And with that, I yield back.
The member yields back. I now recognize Ms. Chu to strike the last word for 5 minutes.
I strongly support this resolution of inquiry, and it is because my constituents are sick with worry at the risk of fraudsters having their Social Security numbers, banking information, and other personal information shared with Musk cronies who've invaded the Social Security Administration. So let's be clear. President Trump and Elon Musk have launched a public campaign against Social Security. Mr. Musk is calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme, and both he and President Trump are spreading widely discredited lies about the program and its integrity. But the facts don't add up. Let me read just a few of the countless news headlines debunking their false claims. The Associated Press says tens of millions of dead people aren't getting Social Security checks despite Trump and Musk claims. ABC News says Musk misreads Social Security data. Millions of dead people are not getting benefits, experts say. CBS News says new Social Security chief refutes claims of deceased people over 100 years old getting checks. The Washington Post says Elon Musk claims of Social Security fraud don't hold up, and here's why. And the New York Times says millions of dead people on Social Security, the agency's own data says otherwise. And in fact, the claims by Elon Musk are based on complete misunderstanding of Social Security's data systems, which often lack complete birth and death information for people born before 1920, before Social Security was established and long before electronic records were kept. A 2023 Inspector General report said that almost none of these people born before 1920 with missing information are paid benefits. But my constituents are also worried because the Trump administration is taking a wrecking ball to the Social Security Administration. Far from making the agency more efficient, they are undermining its ability to serve the public. And why are they trying to destroy the Social Security Administration? It's the first step of a long-standing effort by Republicans to dismantle trust in Social Security and slash benefits. The Trump administration wants to close Social Security offices across the nation and slash the agency's workforce by nearly 1 in 8 employees. Social Security Administration, this administration is already at a 50-year staffing low due to years of underfunding, and it's serving more beneficiaries than ever. How will gutting its workforce help it to serve the American people? Well, the answer is that it doesn't, and in fact, it's very likely a move to undermine confidence so that the Trump administration can privatize it. And with that, I yield back.
Member yields back. I now recognize Ms. Moore for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you so very, very much, Mr. Chairman and ranking member and members. I am reminded of what Maya Angelou, who they are, believe them the first time. And then, of course, Rachel Maddow, who is a news commentator on MSNBC, often says you need to watch what people do and not what they say. And I think that those are very helpful admonitions in view of this discussion here today. We have our Republican colleagues swearing that Donald Trump will not do anything to Social Security. And, you know, from your lips to God's ears, let's hope, you know, I'm on your side. I'm hoping that you're right. But we have known that Republicans have long wanted to destroy Social Security and really privatize it. As a matter of fact, former chair of this committee, my good friend Paul Ryan from Wisconsin, openly tried to privatize Social Security. My own Senator Johnson was the first person I ever heard call it a Ponzi scheme, long before Elon Musk was on the scene. And Mick Mulvaney, during the Trump 1 administration, who was a former chief of staff, testified before the Joint Economic Committee that, yes, we need to go after Social Security because just like Jesse James robbed banks, it's because that's where the money is. And so I am, I'm not convinced that they're not going to do it. Musk has just basically said we need to go after entitlement spending, which he designates as Social Security and Medicare. So I think that it's important for our Republican friends not to be willfully ignorant, to be useful idiots about this. And so that's what they say. But what are they doing? Let's look at that. This CR that we passed just yesterday, in order to flat fund the operations of the Social Security Administration, we would have had to have added $600 million. Instead of adding the $600 just to flat fund the agency, they cut it by an additional $100 million. That's $700 million. Watch what they do. You're trying to save Social Security, but you want to destroy customer service. We heard Mr. Estes, the new chairman of the subcommittee, talk about how awful the customer service is. Well, yeah, but that is part of the scheme, to undermine Social Security to the point that people lose faith in it. And as a matter of fact, Martin O'Malley sent me this text. He says they just want to wreck it so they can rob it. And now with this CR and the mass firings taking place at Social Security, as we speak, they are destroying customer service for the American people, driving this agency to collapse and putting at grave and serious risk the monthly benefits of 72 million Americans. That's the former commissioner of Social Security, Martin O'Malley. And then the President Trump tells us that he's going to cut taxes on Social Security. Well, that really sounds great. Send people, I heard, $5,000 checks. That really sounds great. And that, of course, would help people making $20,000, $30,000 immediately, but in the long run, they would be hurt the most, and wealthy people would be helped the most. But in the meantime, it would cost the trust fund $1.5 trillion to do that. Watch what they do, not what they say. That would undermine Social Security tremendously. The Social Security payment accuracy is about 99.8%. So I don't know how much waste, fraud, and abuse can be found in it. This really, the last point that I want to make is that Elon Musk is a tech tycoon. And I wonder what the value of this data is to him. It's immeasurable. So this is a serious conflict of interest for this man to have Social Security data when he is a tech tycoon.
Member's time has expired.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence, and I yield back.
I recognize Mr. Boyle to strike the last word for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Strike the last word. Mr. Chairman, 70 million Americans get Social Security. It is the most successful anti-poverty program in American history. It is sometimes called an entitlement. I prefer to call it an earned benefit. Millions of Americans throughout their working careers paid into Social Security with every paycheck. It truly is an earned benefit. Now, there are some who have expressed falsely the notion that somehow Social Security contributes to our national debt. It doesn't at all. In fact, right now, there is a $2.7 trillion surplus in the Social Security Trust Fund. It has been certified both by the Congressional Budget Office as well as the Social Security trustees that there is enough money in the trust fund to fully pay out benefits, 100% of benefits, today through the year 2035, so for the next decade. And certainly we have enough time over the next decade to make modifications that are necessary to ensure that Social Security is fully there for generations to come. So no, the greatest threat to Social Security is not its current financing. The greatest threats to Social Security are Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Elon Musk recently called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. Not the first time, by the way, that he has used that exact term, a Ponzi scheme. You know, Vice President Vance last fall explicitly said that Elon Musk would, and I quote, target Social Security, and that he has. Elon Musk has previously raised the specter of privatization of Social Security. This is also not the first time that we have heard of a Republican effort to privatize Social Security. Exactly 20 years ago, when George W. Bush won re-election, right about this moment, he said, and I quote, "I have political capital and I intend to use it." He wanted to spend that political capital on the privatization of Social Security. Fortunately, that effort was defeated. Elon Musk is not the first and won't be the last Republican to call Social Security a Ponzi scheme. There are multiple Republican members of the U.S. Senate serving right now who called it exactly that, a Ponzi scheme, one of whom went further in a legislation that every 5 years, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid would have to be reauthorized or they would go away. That is the ultimate goal. We should be under no illusion whatsoever that this so-called Doge effort is to identify waste or fraud. Social Security is a 99.8% accuracy rate. Private sector would do well to meet such a high rate of 99.8%. It is no wonder that Social Security is the most popular government program that we have. So on behalf of my own father and the tens of millions of Americans who rely on Social Security, who have earned that benefit, I know that we on this side of the dais will continue to speak out and defend it. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Now recognize the member from Virginia, Mr. Breyer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, we've heard the $72 billion number a number of times. The OIG report from 2015 to 2022. That's an awful lot of money, but let's point out that's less than 1% of the money paid out over that 8-year period of time. It's still a great deal. We need to deal with it, but it's not like show me any organization, any business operation that doesn't have 1% mistake in it, and I'll be astonished. By the way, let me also point out that during that 8-year period of time, Donald Trump was president for those 4 years, 4 of those 8 years. Look, my real deep concern is about Elon Musk's attitude about his misunderstanding of and his plans for the Social Security Administration. Well, let me just first begin with the absolute lack of transparency about Elon Musk himself and his many, many complicated financial interests. I just compare it to my personal experience. When I wanted to serve on the Obama transition team, 2008, I got fingerprinted for the first time. They went and talked to my employees and my neighbors. I had to file extensive background check. It took me hours and to fill out hundreds of pages. When I went to Switzerland for the State Department, I was prohibited from any ties to the business I'd spent decades building in order to prevent any possible corruption. When I came here, when I owned stocks, I had to report them every single month, any activity. We have to do this extensive financial disclosure every May. For 10 years, I've bought every meal, every cup of coffee, paid every toll. Never allowed to promote any business because I'm not special. We are not special. We are servants of the public. And then you get Elon Musk, who is a very special case. He is the greatest possibility for corruption by far in American history. And don't get me started on Tesla advertisements on the White House lawn. My constituents depend on Social Security, not just as an earned entitlement to support them after retirement, but as an agency they expect to work with when we need it. Every year I go to our Social Security office to visit, pump them up, and I'm so impressed with how hard everyone is working. Everyone's busy the entire time. So closing offices and messing with the system that people have paid into their entire lives, closing without full transparency, It's just crazy. I can't imagine a need to access Social Security payment information in this manner, short of trying to dismantle the agency. We've heard again and again that Musk thinks it's a Ponzi scheme. But look, if someone's messing with my money, I want full transparency of what they're doing. And the Trump-Vance administration has the Silicon Valley perspective of move fast and break it. But that doesn't work with the federal government. It doesn't work with the social administration. And if the goal is to derail and dismantle the Trump Social Security, Trump shouldn't hide that. My Republican friends have again said today they have no intention of doing that. But when Musk and Trump close offices, fire employees, make it harder to get the phone answered, make it longer to get an appointment, when they destroy people's confidence in the most important anti-poverty program in the history of mankind, what else are we to conclude? If they can make Social Security dysfunctional, why not turn over the $2.7 trillion of assets to private sector where it can generate huge profits for a handful of money managers? This inquiry supports bringing all those actions to light. And if my Republican friends are not ashamed, they should support this simple inquiry. I yield back.
Member yields back. I now recognize Ms. Van Dyne.
Thank you very much.
5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, when President Trump got elected, he promised to change the status quo and bring accountability to D.C. And that starts with an in-depth review of the agencies, including Social Security, that pay trillions of dollars a year out. Doge employees are subject to the same legal penalties, and I want to make sure that we are understanding that because we've seen a lot of unsubstantiated charges today. But they are subject to the same legal penalties and fines for improper disclosure of sensitive information as every other Social Security Administrator employee. In fact, the acting commissioner of Social Security affirmatively stated that Doge personnel cannot make changes to agency systems, benefit payments, or other information. They only have read access. Doge personnel must follow the law, and if they violate the law, they will be deferred to the Department of Justice for possible persecution. The status quo is no longer acceptable, and Americans voted for change, and President Trump is delivering. In fact, we've heard some complaints today about the level of quality of customer service. I would have them know that I've got great news for my colleagues who requested information about the service provided by Social Security's National 800 number. Not only does the Social Security Administration already publicly post up-to-date information on the performance of that 1-800 number, but including information asked in the ROI, but that information is showing significant improvement since the service delivery lows under the Biden administration. I asked for unanimous consent to submit for the record a chart from the SSA's website showing that the 800 number's average speed of an answer for this fiscal year is 21.6 minutes. This is down, by the way, from 35.8 minutes during the Biden administration. So I would hope that all of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would be thanking President Trump. But I also want to talk about some of the most egregious and easily provable lie that we've heard on this side, that President Trump wants to get rid of or deduct from Social Security, wants to reduce Social Security. President Trump has promised to increase the efficiency and accountability of Washington's bureaucracy. It is a fact that waste, fraud, and abuse exist at the Social Security Administration. Fact, the Social Security Administration made an estimate of $72 billion in improper payments between 2015 and 2022. It exists. We know that it exists. The Social Security's Office of the Inspector General found that. President Trump has repeatedly stated that he will fight for Social Security. President Trump has repeatedly stated that he will protect Social Security. And President Trump has repeatedly stated that he will not cut Social Security. House Republicans stand with President Trump's commitment to preserving and strengthening Social Security benefits for seniors that they count on. But in addition to that, I don't want to just talk for the president because we have all heard him say it numerous times, but let the president's words speak for themselves.
Touched. Other than this fraud or something, we're going to find it's going to be strengthened, but won't be touched. Medicare, Medicaid, none of that stuff is going to be touched. Nothing. Social Security will not be touched. It'll only be strengthened. I'm not going to touch Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Now we're going to get fraud out of there. You know, look, Social Security won't be touched. Other than this fraud or something, we're going to.
So I don't know how many times the man has to say it. He has repeated it publicly a number of times. If you go to the White House website, they have it published a number of times. I keep hearing this lie over and over again. They know it's wrong. I would really hope that we could all work and want to have it be more effective, a more efficient program, and that's what we're here to do, and I would hope that I can get my other colleagues on the other side of the aisle to agree with that, and with that I yield.
Member yields. I now recognize Mr. Evans for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
I move to strike the last word. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this makeup today for us to address two important resolutions which demands transparency in the federal government. I know my Republican colleagues are big fans of government transparency, so I expect they will vote in favor of these resolutions. Over the weekend, I held the town meeting. Thousands of constituents in my district. During my town hall, numerous constituents submitted questions regarding the treatment that the Trump administration posed to Social Security. Many of my constituents wanted to know what Congress is doing to protect the information from Trump, Musk, and their hackers that are taking over the government. The answer to them is that this bill is what the government is doing. By paying the resolution of inquiry, Congress will be able to demand answers from the administration on how American data being illegally retrieved from addressing the Social Security Administration and is being restricted on how service and payment to Social Security recipients will be impacted. I think it would be a no-brainer that this committee would want more information on how our constituents are being served and how the official handling this information are being honored. A vote against this resolution is a vote to protect Donald Trump and Mr. Musk and vote against protecting the American people. Mr. Chairman, there's probably no more significant issue, as you heard the members talking about Social Security and what it means. All of us stand behind it, particularly on the Democratic side, because for what is done, it's an earned benefit. It's something people need. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to yield, pass it to Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Evans, for yielding. I just want to point out that was mentioned by one of our colleagues that the President Trump has made all these pledges and promises to protect Social Security, and we shouldn't be worried. But we are worried because, you know, his right-hand person is calling it a Ponzi scheme. Republican members of Congress have bills to do away with it and to privatize it and to let it phase out. This is terribly concerning. And I want to point out that all these promises that then candidate Trump made, we're hearing about from our friends on the other side of the dais, none of those were a promise to privatize Social Security. And that's what he's talking about now. It's been pointed out that he's against waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, we're all against waste, fraud, and abuse. But the fact of the matter is the Trump administration is firing federal prosecutors across the country, threatening to impeach any judges that don't agree with him. And it looks to me like if there's a big void in this fraud area, if there's all this fraud that's being being discovered, why aren't there charges being filed? Fraud is against the law. And if someone breaks the law, you file charges against them. I haven't seen any fraud charges being brought up after all this investigative work. Waste, we've seen the result of all of the reported waste, the waste of people 350 years old collecting Social Security benefits. We already know that that's just not only a false claim, but it's a laughable claim. So I'm not sure where this waste is. If there is waste, let's work together to do away with it. And as far as abuse, the most abuse that I've seen so far is the abuse that our constituents who rely on Social Security and Medicare or Medicaid are experiencing right now. That's very abusive what's going on. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Mr. Snyder for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. I'm proud to join my Democratic colleagues today to support H.Res 195 to compel the Trump administration to provide to this body all information pertaining to Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency's attacks on the Social Security Administration. I can tell you my constituents are writing, calling, pleading. They are profoundly concerned about what the Doge or Doge is doing to Social Security. Maybe there's a good plan, but they don't know, and the words we're hearing, Elon Musk calling it a Ponzi scheme, give reason, legitimate reason for concern. The American people deserve to know what Doge is doing, whether it is strengthening or undermining Social Security and the safety net in this country. Social Security is an earned benefit. Period, stop. After a lifetime of hard work, millions of current and future retirees are counting on their Social Security benefits that they worked for, they paid for, that they have earned. I didn't think that I would have to sit in this hearing room and make the case to my Republican colleagues, but we must do everything we can to protect Social Security. 40-plus years ago, Congress worked together to strengthen Social Security for the next generations. That burden is falling on us, and unfortunately, we are turning our back and abdicating our responsibilities, Congress's responsibilities, acquiescing to the demands of an unelected oligarch. Social Security is under direct threat from Elon Musk and Doge. The millions of workers who have followed the rules for their entire careers and paid into this system deserve to trust that their hard-earned benefits will not be cut by an unelected oligarch. My Republican colleagues today will tell you that the Trump administration will not hurt Social Security and benefits. We even heard a recording of the president's voice, and that the Democrats are needlessly causing panic or obsessed with Elon Musk. Let me be clear. I would love to never think or hear from Elon Musk ever again. I wish I could count on the president to be true to his words. History has shown otherwise. This week I had a telephone town hall, and I promise you that the people on that town hall are frightened about the actions of Elon Musk and the false promises of President Trump. They are scared that their benefits are at risk. I wish I could provide them the comfort and confidence that Social Security is safe. But sadly, that's not the world we're living in today. Elon Musk thinks Social Security, and again I am quoting, is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time. And he's the one in the driver's seat. Benefits that are earned by people working and paying into a system are not a Ponzi scheme. Elon Musk has said that the fraud in Social Security is the big one to eliminate. I agree we should eliminate fraud. We should work to eliminate waste. We can all agree that there are improvements to be made in the federal government, and processes can always be made more efficient to better serve the American people. That's not what Doge is doing. In my home state of Illinois, we have 2.3 million Social Security beneficiaries, people who rely on their Social Security income that they paid for and earned to make ends meet, to give them the security and a dignified retirement. They want good customer service. We talked about it here. One of my colleagues said that, hey, we're improving customer service. Well, Doge is planning to close Social Security field offices and hearing offices and reduce staff. That's not going to improve service. What impact will that have on the 70 million Americans who receive Social Security benefits? Rather than improving service, these actions will undermine Social Security's ability to serve beneficiaries and deliver payments on time with certainty. And that's just wrong. Social Security is a sacred trust. It is the foundation of our economic security. The American people deserve to know what the administration is planning for the future of Social Security and the Social Security Administration and what impact that will have on their benefits. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this resolution, simply asking for transparency, for information about what the administration is doing to an earned benefit Americans have worked hard for. If it's true, as my Republican colleagues say, that Musk is no threat to the system, let this resolution prove us wrong. And if, as we believe, Musk has plans to privatize, to minimize, to reduce, and ultimately eliminate Social Security, we should know that as well. The American people deserve to know the truth. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and now recognized from Florida, Mr. Bean.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and a very good afternoon to you. Good afternoon, Ways and Means Committee. We agree. There is something that these two sides that keep going back and forth agree on. The American people are scared and confused, and there's one reason why they are scared and confused about Social Security, because these folks on the left of me keep saying falsely that President Trump and these Republicans want to cut, privatize, or eliminate Social Security. It is simply not true. When you bang your hand on the dais and you raise your voice to scare the American people and confuse them, I don't think it does us any good. Because I'm going to tell you the truth, American people. I don't know what camera to look at if I'm looking directly at the American people. The American people need to know this town, our government, is addicted to spending. They're addicted to spending, and we are an addict of spending. Both parties. Both parties have abused it. Both parties have overspent. And now our promise to the American people to always give you your money through Social Security is in jeopardy. In 9 years, if we don't make changes in 9 years, 2034, changes will come automatically, and these benefits will be adjusted downward. And that's the last thing that President Trump, this committee, Chairman Smith, Chairman Estes, who showed us last week in a slideshow that's really terrifying, that we have to make changes. So we're gonna have to cut ourselves off. It's like an addict realizing that changes are gonna have to be made. We bring in an auditor who points out all of this crazy spending, and because some people can't defend the crazy spending found, their playbook is the only card to play is to blame the auditor. As if we owned a store that was robbed. Elon Musk watches the video and says, here's who stole from you. And then we say, oh my gosh, I can't believe he looked at the videotape. He had no authority to look at the videotape of who robbed me. So people, we have to come together. And I want you to know your words have consequences. You have vilified Elon Musk, who's working for free. He is a government employee, but he's working for free. I've got 2 articles of massive attacks nationwide on Elon Musk's Tesla program and dealerships. And Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I've got a CBS News article, Molotov cocktails, arson, graffiti across the nation, as well as an online edition of Order in Courts of all of the things that are happening to charging stations across the United States. And without objection, I ask that they be entered into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
So we're addicted to spending. We got to cut ourselves off. Now, I know we keep hearing Elon Musk is unelected. He's unelected. Let me tell you who is unelected. Whoever was using Biden's auto pen for the last 4 years, that is who is unelected. I've heard some history stories this morning. I'm going to give you the history, the real history of the last time we came together to solve problems. Let me tell you who did it. It was, how about this? It was Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich from both sides of the political spectrum came together, and they passed the last balanced budget. And how about this? Bill Clinton did it through the elimination of 428,000 employees, and he did it through $25,000 buyouts. He offered buyouts for federal employees. And so that is the playbook of how we can get it done. Let me tell you, American people, I'm looking at you, and I'm making an honest plea to this committee and everybody watching. If we're going to solve it, maybe we need to go to a room where there's no cameras and we can be honest that we're going broke. We have an addiction to spending. And it's just hard to realize that that can't continue. We're on an unsustainable path. That is the dangerous existential threat to our country. It's just we're spending ourselves into oblivion. So finally, we're realizing we've got a government we can't afford, we've got employees we can't afford, and we are finally right-sizing. I know it hurts. I know it hurts, but if we're going to be the land of the free for our children and grandchildren, then we must make these hard decisions right now. Stand with me, Democrats. Stand with me, Republicans. And let's go forward for the American people. Get this job done for our kids and grandkids. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I recognize from California, Mr. Panetta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. To my colleague and good friend from Florida, Mr. Bean, look, man, fact is that the Clinton administration had a plan. That's all we're asking for. We just want to see the plan. That's the intent of this resolution right here. It's very straightforward. And more importantly, it's desired and it's demanded by my constituents in California's 19th Congressional District. All it would do would require the administration to provide Congress with details about what the heck Elon Musk and Doge is doing in their accessing of sensitive information at the Social Security Administration. All we're asking for is transparency. And this inquiry would do that by requiring information about the actions taken by Doge to reduce staff and shut down offices at the Social Security Administration. We are asking because these actions directly impact the delivery of benefits to all of our constituents. Now, in my district alone, over 140,000 people receive Social Security benefits, with 282 million in monthly benefits. That's 120,000 retirees, 5,000 children, and 8,000 disabled workers. To get those benefits, my constituents need a Social Security Administration that is responsive, that's prompt, and just able to do its dang job. Now, I agree, we'll have to do something about the Social Security Administration. If we don't have serious conversations about it, about how we shore it up, about how we fix it, we got to do that, because if we don't, we lose it by 2034. Something needs to be done. But that something is not putting it in the wood chipper without a plan. Because if you allow Elon Musk to do that, then you will be held accountable. Now, one of the things that I pride myself on, and I think if you're a good member of Congress, all of us pride ourselves on this, is casework. Making the federal government work for people at a personal level. That's what inspired me to run for Congress, because I heard about it throughout my life. This is how we are doing our jobs, that we can then affect people's lives for the better. And when they have an issue with the federal government, when it comes to the services of the federal government that they have earned, they come to us. IRS, veterans, passports, immigration, and of course, Social Security. They rely on us to help them with that. And since I've been in office, we have worked on thousands and thousands of cases related to Social Security. And I'm proud to say that when it comes to Social Security, we have had numerous success stories for people who come to us after struggling to get answers. So we get the inquiry, we get on the horn, and we push the agencies to get them to do the right thing, to get to yes for our constituents. We highlight the issue, we push the issue, and there are people there to help us solve the issue. Now, unfortunately, this administration is doing the exact opposite. It's putting the Social Security Agency in a wood chipper by cutting the people and gutting the systems that help us, that help our constituents get their earned benefits. They want to decimate it. They want to tear it down, and eventually it looks like that they want to privatize it. They are doing this by planning to close nearly 50 field offices and slashing the Social Security workforce by 12%. They have not provided evidence to prove that this can be done without impacting benefits. If anything, they are proving the opposite. Closing field offices means longer travel times and less help for people looking for guidance. Reducing the workforce means fewer people to review disability claims, hear appeals, answer phones, and sort through the paperwork required to claim survivor benefits. Last year, Social Security call wait times were actually improving and reduced to 13 minutes. This year, they're already back to doubling that time at over a half hour. What's worse is that as a part of these cuts by Doge, the acting Social Security Commissioner, Leland Dudek, said himself that outsiders who are unfamiliar with the nuances of the Social Security programs are making decisions and they will make mistakes. Mr. Chairman, mistakes could have terrible consequences for our constituents, for your constituents, and for the access of benefits that they have earned. Look, our duty as members of Congress is to conduct oversight. That means asking the administration basic questions about what they are doing with taxpayer resources and why these actions have been taken. Like I said, and I think many of you, all of us, are proud of the casework we do when we make government work for people. But when those services stop or get reduced, the least that we can do is live up to our responsibility as members of Congress to find out why, how, and what. We're asking for it, but let me tell you, our constituents, your constituents, are demanding it. So it's well past time that we stop abdicating our constitutional responsibilities and start pushing back on this administration, Elon Musk, and Doge. We fight to ensure that our constituents get those services. Let's fight by supporting this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back and now recognize Ms. Delbene for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time to Mr. Larson.
I thank the gentlelady from Washington. And I would, Mr. Chairman, like to submit for the record, in fact, it just came out, that under the title of Democracy Dies in Darkness, Social Security facing pressure from Doge weighs big cuts to phone service. You question why we want to have Elon Musk in front of us. And here, the very group that he's leading is pressuring people to do away with the phone service. As Mr. Panetta just mentioned, his constituents are responding, as are all of our constituents.
Pursuant to the unanimous consent request that so ordered.
Pardon?
Unanimous consent so ordered.
Thank you for, and continuing with this article, because I think it's very relevant to the discussion here and should be part of the record. It would take me 10 minutes to read it. But it deserves to be here, along with, we've heard today a lot about facts. Here's the facts. Here's the truth. There are over 70 million Americans who rely on Social Security. 10,000 baby boomers a day become eligible for Social Security. There has been no adjustment to Social Security in over 50 years. 5 million of your fellow Americans get below poverty level checks from Social Security, having paid into it all their lives. Most of them are women, and of them, most of them are women of color. For close to 50% of all Americans, Social Security is the main thing they have. The genius of Franklin Delano Roosevelt is still with us today. It is the safety net for capitalism that you guys should be joining with us to make sure that we preserve and extend and provide that opportunity where you have an environment where you can take risk, knowing that there's a safety net there for the very people who work hard and play by the rules every day to make that investment. I yield my remaining of my time to Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. So my friend, Mr. Bean, pointed out a couple of things that I think are really important. So let's take a look at the record. In 1981, President Reagan presided over a substantial tax cut. In 1982, President Reagan looked at the tax cut and said, no, 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 it's too much, we have to revisit it, which he did. In 1990, President Bush Sr., after having made a pledge at a Republican National Convention, based on what he thought were the facts at the time, came back and looked at the facts in 1990 and changed his mind. In 1993, Bill Clinton, he decided that there had to be cuts and revenue increases. In 1997, again, it took place. I would also point out that the Republican leader at the time, Bob Michel, a distinguished member of Congress and a really nice guy, by the way, he went along with it. What President Bush wanted to do, and then subsequently what came to be the balanced budgets, took place 4 times. I don't understand for the life of me how we can say that we're about to add, over the objections of this side, $4 trillion to the national debt through tax cuts and say that's going to give us a balanced budget. The logic escapes all of us. So let's take Reagan, Bush, and Clinton twice and use those models for getting to what we all would like, and that's a more balanced budget picture.
I recognize Mr. Arrington. 5 minutes to strike the last word.
I thank the chairman. Every dime that is wasted in the Social Security Administration and administrating the benefits to our beloved seniors, and quite frankly, any government program, is a dime that doesn't go to the intended beneficiary, to people that depend on these programs. And in the case of Social Security, every dime that we're not vigilant, every dime of waste that we're not vigilant about rooting out, shortens the solvency of the Social Security Trust Fund, which now has a fuse of 8 years before every senior, every retiree that depends on that safety net will take an automatic 20% cut. And that's indisputable. We all agree with that. So unless and until both sides come together to actually fix the broken Social Security system so it's there and sustainable for generations, we ought to do the first order of business, and that is reducing and eliminating wasteful spending and inefficiencies in the program. I don't think there's a senior in America that would not support that. And look, if this were about just merely having a plan, we just want to know, this is just an innocent request for a little more information and transparency, then there wouldn't be this rhetoric about they're decimating the program, they're gutting the program, they're utterly destroying the program. I don't believe you right now. I don't believe that it is this sincere attempt to just understand what the plan is, because the rhetoric isn't consistent with that. It's rhetoric that is scaring our seniors. In fact, I think it's predatory. And it is not productive to the end of having us work together. And we both know, both sides know this, because I know my friend Mr. Larson has a plan. But when the Democrats had full control from top to bottom of this town, they didn't put that plan on the floor. They didn't advance it. Now, you were willing to do it. I appreciate your leadership. I don't like your plan, but you had the courage to put it forward. We all should accept the reality, political reality, that it's going to take both sides to do it, just like with Reagan and Tip O'Neill. Let me finish my point, if I may. This is not going to help us get there. This is why this place is broken, and this is why it's nearly impossible for both sides to come together, because the baseball bat, the political baseball bat, is taken out so easily and quickly to beat the other side when they're trying to do the right thing. The president said he's not going to touch the benefits, he's going to protect it. But in every program and in every way, it's being poorly managed, and dollars are misspent and misappropriated, and there's waste, and the taxpayers and the beneficiaries are being defrauded. He's going to be vigilant. His colleagues, like Elon Musk and others who've been tasked with this, will be diligent, and so will we. That is, I think, an expectation of the American people. I just called the Social Security Administration, and this was the response I got. First of all, I couldn't get to a human being. They said it's going to take a couple of hours, and I don't know any senior that
wouldn't give up on that, first fact. Secondly, for the disability benefits, it says we'll get back to you in 200 days. Fill out a bunch of forms, wait for 2 hours, we'll get back to you in 200 days. There's got to be a better way to run the railroad. And seniors have suffered, and it's not, the answer isn't always throw more money at it, throw more people at it. I know that's the response for those who believe in, in the government we trust. Well, it's not working. Seniors aren't getting a good response. People aren't showing up to work, and there's a bunch of waste and fraud that needs to be dealt with head on. So I don't believe this scare tactic is going to work. It will whip our seniors into a state of anxiety and distress, and that is so unfortunate and so sad. I'm out of time, and I yield back, and I'm sure I'll hear from my friend, Mr. Larson.
Mr. Horsford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I request to strike the last word. As lawmakers, we have a solemn duty to protect our constituents, those beneficiaries on Social Security, from external threats and also from bad actors within. That's why I am calling on my colleagues to vote in favor of this resolution. The people who elected us did so with the trust that we would safeguard their privacy, ensuring their personal data is never politicized, sold to the highest bidder, or used to jeopardize their benefits. My constituents should believe and be able to trust that government will work on their behalf regardless of who they choose to represent them on Capitol Hill as well. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from CNN, Republicans Succeed in Persuading Musk, but Democrats Hit Dead Ends.
Without objection.
Earlier this week, President Trump and Elon Musk went about cherry-picking which Social Security field and hearing offices would stay open. In the article, Mr. Cole from Oklahoma was able to convince Doge to keep his local offices open while they didn't even have the decency to notify my office of their intent to close one of the critical offices in Las Vegas. Let me be clear. Members of Congress shouldn't have to kiss Elon Musk's ass to get our offices for our constituents on Social Security open or to have them remain open. I am offended by the fact that members on the other side are using their access to Elon Musk and jeopardizing the well-being of everyone else. My constituents deserve the same treatment that Representative Coles are receiving. And this is not about politics. It's not about voting Republican or Democrat or whether you belong to a party or not. And I also want to lift up this article that just came out because it speaks to the hypocrisy. While we are having this hearing today, and while the other side is objecting to even getting basic information about what Elon Musk is doing to Social Security, they literally announced ending the phone program that helps with claims processing and is used by millions of elderly and disabled Americans.
Without objection.
This data shows that the agency received 81.2 million calls to its national toll-free number in 2023, although not all were for claims. Staff within Social Security are currently gaming out scenarios for how to handle an abrupt reduction of telephone service, one of the persons briefed on the matter said. So to my colleagues, do you think this is cutting Social Security? It is. Do you think this is hurting constituents' ability to get their rightful questions asked about their earned benefit? This is not an entitlement. Do you think this is helping make government more efficient? And why wouldn't we have the person, the mastermind, the genius, Elon Musk, who's come up with this proposal to come before this committee? Or at least respond based on the list of questions that are called for in this query. I have 140,000 individuals in my district who depend on Social Security. The majority of them, it's their sole source of income. 108,000 are retirees. 16,500 are disabled workers who count on these benefits. And yeah, I'll bang on the damn dais because I'm here to defend my constituents from Elon Musk, Donald Trump, or House Republicans who will try to take away what they have invested into their own Social Security. This is money they earned. Take your hands off of the people's Social Security. It's not yours. And Elon Musk wasn't elected to do a damn thing. I yield back.
Mr. LaHood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This conversation today would be much different if we were $36 trillion in surplus, but we're not. We're $36 trillion in debt. And to think that we can't have a conversation about looking at our debt and deficit and economic policy different is political malpractice. It's government malpractice. Not to have a conversation about Doge, not to have a conversation about cutting spending, not by having a conversation about the fiscal health of our country. And it's interesting, I also serve on our House Intelligence Committee. And last year we had General Petraeus and General McChrystal, served under Republicans and Democrats, have unbelievable reputations for serving in our military. And they came and talked to us about the threats facing America from our adversaries. So they talked about China, and they talked about Russia, they talked about Iran, but they said the biggest threat is our debt and our deficit. And as most of us should know, we're paying more now on our interest than we do the entire Department of Defense. Think about that for a sec. It's insane. But yet we can't have a conversation with a new president that ran on fixing the fiscal health of this country, created the Doge Committee, Department on Government Efficiency. Again, it's political malpractice that we're not thinking about this. I want to reference an article from it was an editorial in the Wall Street Journal dated February 25th of this year titled "America's Future Depends on Doge." And I want to read one section of that. The message from today's civic elites is that the president's job is to pretend to be in charge while doing nothing meaningful. Shut up. Don't disturb the administrative state. Let it keep doing its thing without oversight or disruption. And you'll get your library or best-selling presidential memoir. Mr. Trump refuses this deal. In his second term, he's determined to slay the bureaucratic beast. He knows all too well from his first term and the Biden years. Doge's efforts are epic, breaking more than a century of acquiescence to spending and government. The Trump team is courageously confronting the problem head on. We have an obligation and a responsibility to bring down our debt and get this country back on track economically. And the Doge Commission and what President Trump and his team are doing is putting us on that path. I yield back.
Ms. Plaskett.
Mr. Chair, I move to strike the last word.
Ladies recognized.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, my colleagues today we've all been talking about accountability. And I think that this resolution speaks to accountability. Because many of us believe that the Trump administration is taking a wrecking ball to Social Security Administration. And they don't want to meet with us about that. Far from making the agency more efficient, the Trump administration is undermining its ability to serve the public. And the primary question is, why? Why is this happening? Why is privatization the goal? Why are they trying to destroy Social Security? Many of us believe it's the first step of a long-standing effort by Republicans to dismantle trust in Social Security, slash benefits, and then allow people who are disgruntled and have lost faith in it to allow Wall Street to take it over. The Trump administration wants to close Social Security offices, slash agencies' workforce. The Social Security Administration is already at a 50-year staffing low due to years of underfunding. And with baby boomers increasing the number of beneficiaries, that's a recipe for disaster. How will gutting the workforce help Social Security Administration serve the American people? The point is, it does not. That's the goal. It does not. The chaos and the confusion, the constant stream of misinformation and missteps have a purpose. Let's talk about that. The misinformation, a Ponzi scheme. Listen, I'm a New Yorker. I understand a Ponzi scheme. A con man promises a payout that he can't deliver, collects the money, and disappears. That's not what's happening in the Social Security Administration, because people have put their money in it, and they are receiving a benefit. That's not a Ponzi scheme. Repeatedly stating that dead people and 150-year-olds are receiving checks, every newspaper, every group has said that that's untrue, including the Washington Post, which has already kissed the ring of the president. They're the ones also who have said that that's not true. How are we doing this? And why are we doing this? We want to bring back accountability. My colleague has stated that Doge only has read-only access. We've seen weeks ago that that's not true. Oh, they just accidentally were able to make changes to it, they told us later on, and now they've gone back to read-only access. As a lawyer, the notion that they can be prosecuted for improper disclosure, that's if you find that they've had improper disclosure, first of all. And second of all, if they keep the information for themselves for data mining, for future elections, we would never be able to find that out to be able to prosecute it because it's not disclosed to anyone but themselves. Why are they keeping this information, and what is the purpose of it? Make no mistake, the Trump administration's actions are to devastate the Social Security Administration's ability to serve the public and deliver Social Security payments so that they can then have access to $2.7 trillion for Wall Street to be able to play with. They need more money because you know what? We're not addicted to spending, as my colleague said. Many people are addicted to greed. That's what this is about. And the greed happens to be not from themselves, but for the American people. That's the Ponzi scheme, is them taking your damn money and using it for them own self, to enrich themselves more than they already have. That's the addiction. And you know what? This place is broken because Congress has abdicated its responsibility to be the ones to find that race fraud and abuse and to do something different about it. We're letting somebody who's unelected, who's an auditor, now he's an auditor. Is he everything? Is he God? To be able to do what he wants to do with the American people. It's got to stop. I yield back.
Any further members wish to strike the last word? Mr. Swazi.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out some basic facts that people need to understand. Jody, this is important. In the 1970s, we had about 203 million people in America. Today, we have 350 million people in America. In the 1970s, we had about 3 million federal employees. In the 1980s, we had 3.3 million federal employees. In the 1990s, we had 3.4 million federal employees. In 2020, we had 3 million, same as it was in 1970. And so we have about the same number of employees in the federal government today as we had back in the 1970s, even though the population has increased from about 203 million to 350 million people. And we've hired a lot more outside contractors than ever before. We've spent a lot more on outside contracts, like with Elon Musk, for example. but we have the same number of employees that we had back in 1970 as we do today. Now, I don't have back to 1970, but in the Social Security Department, you talked about how your phone call took a long time today. Well, who's in charge right now? Because on the day the Biden administration left, they had gotten it down to a record low response time of 12 minutes to respond to a call, which even 12 minutes to me seems like too much, but that was a record low for what it was. Today, it's going through the roof. And if you look at the number of employees in the Social Security Department, in 1999, there were 59,000 employees. In 2010, there were 66,000 employees. So 59,000 in 1999, 66,000 in 2010. At the end of the Biden administration, there were 56,000 employees, less than it was in 1999, 3,000 less than it was in 1999, and now we're talking about taking it down by another 10,000. Well, no wonder everybody's going to complain that things are broken and it's not working well, because we're trying to take it down. Now, when I was the county executive of Nassau County, we was rated the worst-run county in America before I got there, I want to point out. But we went from 8,500 employees down to about 7,000 employees. We did not do it by laying off the lowest wage new employees, the probationary employees. We did it by normal attrition and by offering retirement incentives to the highest wage, most senior employees. And when those people left, we tried to make up for the reduced workforce by improving the technology and by doing consolidation and procedures and processes to make things more efficient. What we're doing now through Doge is so haphazard and so reckless. And the idea of trying to instill this fear in people and lay off the low-wage people, the provisionary employees, in places that we're trying to hire people up to try and get to the backlogs, like in the IRS, where we make more money than we spend when we hire employees, doesn't make any sense to me. It's just bad management, and it's just scaring the hell out of everybody in the process. And there's going to be a price to pay politically for people, because most of the federal employees live in Republican districts and in Democratic districts, but we'll see that as time goes on. All the stuff we're going to see. You say, we're not going to cut Social Security, we're not going to cut Medicaid, we're not going to cut Medicare. Well, we're going to find out in the next 6 months or so what people are really up to. Then we'll really know what it is. And it's not about instilling fear or not instilling fear. We're going to find out what it is as time goes on. Right now, we're concerned that what Doge is doing is reckless and irresponsible. Do we need to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse? Yes. Do we need to make things more efficient? Yes. Do we need better technology? Yes. Do we need better procedures and processes? Yes. But the way that they're doing it right now, and I've given the examples before, laying off the people in the nuclear stockpile, laying off the people that oversee avian flu, laying off the people that oversee measles, doesn't make any sense to me. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to yield my remaining minute to Chairman Neal.
My friend from Illinois, he said we don't have conversations, and we have a conversation. We just disagree with you on arithmetic. Yeah. The arithmetic's pretty simple. Bush Jr., $2.3 trillion worth of tax cuts. 2017, borrowing $2.3 trillion for a tax cut. Now, to hold forth on the basis of what is alleged to be this out-of-control debt. Oh, and by the way, we're going to raise the debt ceiling by $4 trillion in coming weeks so that we can pay for another tax cut. I mean, the logic escapes all of us here. How we can hold forth and suggest on one hand, we're all very concerned about the debt. Oh, but we'll borrow $2.3 trillion to add more to the debt. And now, $4 trillion we will add to the debt. But we can't have that conversation because it gets in the way of our determination to continue to do borrowing and then complain about the size of the debt. I yield back. Thank you, Chairman.
Additional members wish to strike the last word? Seeing none, are there any amendments?
I'd like to strike the last word, and I'd
Okay.
like.
Okay, we'll do that. We moved on, but we'll do that, Ms. Miller, because you don't talk nearly as much as a lot of people on this committee. So, go, Ms. Miller.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr.
He may change his
Chairman,
mind.
but I am yielding my time to Mr. Arrington.
My name.
Will the gentleman yield? Will the gentleman yield?
You know, I would only speak because my name was invoked. My name was invoked, and my honor was questioned, my integrity, my character. Tom Swazi would never question my integrity or character. He's too good of a friend, and I wouldn't question his. I have questioned the motive here as more political than principled, and I don't like to do that. But that's my judgment right now. I think it's too wrapped up in scoring political points, and we're whipping people up into a frenzy instead of working productively to solve some problems here. But I'm not, Tom, I'd have to look at those numbers. I have not looked at the numbers. But to suggest that the federal government had the same amount of employees in the 60s and 70s as we do in the 21st century, when we didn't even have the microwave oven, let alone the internet, is not that impressive of a stat, to be frank. I think we can probably run this government more efficiently post-technology revolution. We still need people, but we need them to show up. Like, I would have an easier time receiving some of this, really, with the sincere motive of needing more information, wanting more insight, if the same passion and concern were directed to the many government employees who were not showing up for years. And this was post-pandemic, and we just accepted it as the new normal. And when we talk about, like some of my colleagues, the Democrat colleagues, about my constituents are worth it, this is their benefit, their earned benefit, I agree. But why weren't we fighting to make sure that people were seats, butts were in seats, calls were being answered, cases were being resolved? The very fact, in every congressional office experiences, we had casework through the roof for our retirees who couldn't get their phone calls returned and couldn't get their cases resolved.
Will the gentleman yield?
But where was the indignation? Where was the fight for these constituents at that time?
Will the gentleman yield?
It's a sad thing in this country that we need retirees, our beloved seniors, to have to work through their member of Congress just to get a daggum phone call returned. So I would accept some of this in a more sincere fashion if it was consistently applied when we had Democrat control and we had other big inefficiency problems. I trust the president. I trust people who have a track record of successfully and efficiently and effectively running organizations. I think this is long overdue. I think it should go across the government. I think we should get information and we should get insight and we should get the opportunity to change some of the things that are needed and codified by an act of Congress. Like, for example, in Medicaid, and I'll yield with the example of Medicaid, President Biden went back, revoked a policy that reviewed the Medicaid rolls twice a year so that we could ensure that only those legally eligible for Medicaid were receiving the benefit. That's a taxpayer safeguard. That's a safeguard for sustaining the program. And it was revoked from twice a year, and it was only done once a year. Well, that's $160 billion worth of waste and fraud because of a simple program integrity measure that was revoked. That's common sense. I don't think there's an American out there that would say, why in the world would we do that? So I appreciate some of the concern, but I think it is more political than principle, and I appreciate my colleagues, and I appreciate his friendship.
Chairman.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I yield back my time.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Any additional members wish to strike the last word? Are there any amendments? Seeing no amendments, I will now recognize Mr. Buchanan for the purpose of offering a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee report H.Res. 195 adversely to the House of Representatives.
The question is on the motion to report H.Res. 195 adversely to the House of Representatives. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Buchanan.
Yes.
Mr. Buchanan, yes. Mr. Smith of Nebraska. Mr. Smith of Nebraska, yes. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Schweikert. Mr. Schweikert, yes. Mr. LaHood. Mr. LaHood, yes. Mr. Arrington. Mr. Arrington, yes. Mr. Estes. Mr. Estes, yes. Mr. Smucker. Mr. Smucker, yes. Mr. Hearn. Mr. Hearn, yes. Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller, yes. Dr. Murphy. Dr. Murphy, yes. Mr. Kustoff. Mr. Kustoff, yes. Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. Fitzpatrick, yes. Mr. Stubbe. Mr. Stubbe, yes. Ms. Tinney. Ms. Tinney, yes. Mrs. Fishbach.
Yes.
Mrs. Fishbach, yes. Mr. Moore. Yes. Mr. Moore, yes. Ms. Van Dyne. Ms. Van Dyne, yes. Mr. Feenstra. Mr. Feenstra, yes. Ms. Maliotakis. Mr. Carey. Mr. Carey, yes. Mr. Yakum. Mr. Yakum, yes. Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, yes. Mr. Bean. Yes. Mr. Bean, yes. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, yes. Mr. Neal. Mr. Neal, no. Mr. Doggett. Mr. Doggett, no. Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, no. Mr. Larson. Mr. Larson, no. Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis, no. Ms. Sanchez. Ms. Sanchez, no. Ms. Sewell. Ms. Delbene. Ms. Delbene, no. Ms. Chu. Ms. Chu, no. Ms. Moore. Ms. Moore, no. Mr. Boyle. Mr. Boyle, no. Mr. Byer. Mr. Byer, no. Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans, no. Mr. Schneider. Mr. Schneider, no. Mr. Panetta. Mr. Panetta, no. Mr. Gomez. Mr. Horsford. Mr. Horsford, no. Ms. Plaskett. Ms. Plaskett, no. Mr. Swazi. Mr. Swazi, no. Mr. Kelly.
How is Mr. Gomez? I hear him recorded.
Mr. Gomez is not recorded. Mr. Gomez, no. Ms. Maliotakis. Ms. Sewell. Chairman Smith?
Yes.
Chairman Smith, yes.
The clerk will report the vote.
The yeses are 24, the noes are 18.
There being 24 yeses and 18 noes, the motion is agreed to, and H.Res. 195 is ordered reported adversely to the House. Without objection, members have 2 additional days to file with the committee clerk supplemental additional dissenting or minority views. We are adjourned.